Chapter 1354. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? In his dizziness, Gavin Raid naturally thought of the legendary 3 questions of philosophy. Suddenly, a thunderous roar sounded in the turbid air. Gavin Rad, don't just stand there. Attack Thun's stomach wall with all your might. With that, Duque slapped the back of Gavin Rad's head as if trying to wake him up. But Gavin Rad felt even more dizzy. Boss, why do I feel like you were the one who hit me hard just now? Gavin Rad recalled as he slashed at the stomach wall next to him with the wind sword and added a hammer of wrath. How is that possible? Duque argued. It was you who didn't dodge Thun's tentacle before coming down. There are tentacles in the stomach too? Yes. I just destroyed one. How can we understand the physiological structure of a true god-level monster? Dr. Du said confidently. I've read a lot of books, I won't lie to you. Who was the first to come down? Sally Whitemane. She couldn't take it and left. Duque was telling the truth. In this life, Thun's stomach structure was different from that in the game. It was a very interesting stomach part. It was a thing the size of a stool and looked like a meatball. As long as one gave that thing a hard punch, Thun's stomach would twitch violently and vomit out the person who beat the meatball. I see. Gavin Rad sighed. Don't think too much. The time in the stomach is limited. Go all out. As Duque spoke, he squeezed his magic circuit and released as much magic power as possible, bombarding any tentacle that dared to emerge from Thun's stomach. On the outside, Duque was an awesome demigod. Although Duque could last longer than mortals in Thun's stomach and used an ice shield to resist the corrosion of the natural elements, the magic net was cut off. Duque could only rely on his magic circuit, which was far superior to a Breaking Dawn mage but far inferior to a true god, to produce magic power. Soon when the Ox-Head Chief Kane fell down, Duque couldn't hold on any longer. He had no choice. He had wasted too much time trying to save Sally. Before Duque left, he left behind a magic orb. As long as it was not destroyed, the ice elements released from it could at least act as a shield and air filter, allowing the people inside to last longer. Blarg. Under the violent attack of the tender flesh, Thun also vomited Duque out. After watching Duque leave, Gavin Rad heaved a heavy sigh and muttered to himself, "Damn, luckily I was smart enough to pretend to forget. Otherwise I might have been killed this time." What? Kane turned around abruptly. "Oh, I'm fine." Gavin Rad decided to keep this matter to himself. The incident in his stomach was destined to be an episode that no one would ever mention again. On the other side, Sal was surprised to see Duque bounce out of Thun's incense burner body as if he had jumped out of a stone. "Duque, you were just swallowed." No wonder the great chief was shocked. When Duque wasn't around, the songs and dances were still being sung and danced. No, it should be said that under the control of several elemental emissaries, more epic weapons were smashed out. Now there were almost no small tentacles on the scene, whether it was claws or eyeball tentacles. Basically, as soon as the small tentacles came out, they were instantly killed by the weapons thrown out by the Wheel of Victory system. The mortal heroes were able to focus more on dealing with the giant claws and eyeball tentacles. In theory, the scales of victory should be tilted towards the allied forces. But this was not the case. Because in the outer circle of the battlefield, a terrifying fog of death had accumulated. They couldn't figure out what it was, but they could confirm that it wasn't just pure elemental damage. It was more like a combination of crazy will and some kind of terrifying curse. Nozdormu, who was the most unafraid of death, swept his tail made of sand in. It was fine if his tail suddenly broke midway. At first, the broken tail was like a broken lizard's tail, twisting and jumping on its own. After a few breaths, it turned into a sand monster the size of a minotaur with an unknown number of limbs. A kind of chaotic will and power that had never been seen before forcibly took away Nozdormu's control of the sand, which then mutated and created a new unknown type of monster. These monsters were extremely fierce. They fiercely rushed forward and attacked the Alliance and Horde powerhouses. In just one encounter, 2 of the forgotten powerhouses were directly killed, and even their corpses were devoured. Even a strong person like Orgrim's left arm was broken. Fortunately, the undead didn't feel pain. After using dark healing, he could barely move his left arm. Considering that no one had the energy to disperse such a large-scale, tentatively called poisonous fog, the entire battlefield suddenly became crowded. From the initial radius of a large space of 1,000 meters, it quickly shrank to less than 800 meters. Obviously, the speed of shrinking was still increasing. It could be foreseen that in at most 5 minutes, the 4 dragon aspects would completely lose the space to move. Do you have any ideas? Alexstrasza shouted to Duque in the dragon's mental network. Our people will hit Si Thun's stomach. Theoretically, after a certain extent, Si Thun will fall into a short period of weakness. Then we'll go all out? Okay. But I hope that Xianxia will come too. As soon as the Red Dragon Queen's voice fell, 2 voices of opposition immediately appeared in the network. She's not qualified. She can't do it. The first voice was Malago's and the second was Nozdormu's. Obviously, Isra chose to be neutral. Alexstrasza seemed to be in a difficult position. As hardcore members of the Pantheon, the dragons had always fulfilled the duty given to them by the Titans, which was to protect planet Azeroth. They couldn't ignore the disturbance of the ancient gods. However, these ancient gods were existences that even the Titans couldn't deal with back then. In her opinion, the only way to destroy Si Thun's body and seal it again was to gather the 5 great dragon aspects in the Great Formation. Now that Malygos was holding them back, Xianxia could tell at a glance that she didn't have the will and confidence. Alexstrasza felt a headache coming on. At this time, Duque suddenly said, "Xianxia, go. This is for me." The Black Dragon Princess immediately became decisive. It wasn't an order not being forced. Duque's words "for me" could make this once cunning black dragon become brave? The Red Dragon Queen glanced at Duque with curiosity. Malygos didn't let it go. "You'll replenish the insufficient energy?" "Yes. I'll replenish it." Chapter 1355. This is the dragon race's secret. Malygos' voice in the spiritual network was as firm as stone. "I'm only responsible for providing energy. As for how it's used, that's Xianxia's business." That was what Duque said. In fact, for a guy of Duque's level, just from the changes in energy transmission and observing the dragon race's magic array, he could see many things. Not to mention that Duque had a killer weapon, the System Elf. Now the dragon race had fallen into a vicious circle. If they wanted to exert the greatest power, they had to use the black dragons who had once betrayed them. Only by joining the Guardians of the Earth could the Pentashade dragon race be considered complete and exert the power of various high-end magic arrays to the extreme. Here came the main point. Ever since Nethario, the Wing of Death, was tempted by the ancient god Enzoth, the entire black dragon race had become the target of corrosion. Even every young dragon that had just hatched from the dragon egg would be affected by the ancient god. Xianxia was the only exception. Although she was also born after the fall of Deathwing, firstly she was a direct descendant of Nethario, so her vitality and will were stronger. Secondly, she was subdued by Duque when she was on the brink of death at 1% HP. In that extreme situation, even Enzoth had given up on her. In the end, Duque picked up a big bargain and got rid of Enzoth's will and soul corrosion hidden in her. During Alexstrasza's visit, she had even touched Xianxia herself to confirm this. It could be said that Xianxia was now the only black dragon that the Dragon Sleeping Temple could ally with, and the only black dragon that was qualified to be allied with. By the way, a certain black dragon prince who was also quite famous in history was still just an egg. Oh, maybe not even an egg. Because Deathwing died early, perhaps the poor guy known as the Black-Bellied Ratio would no longer have a chance to appear in this life. Speaking of which, since there was no choice, there would not be too much psychological burden. After Alexstrasza promised that if it didn't work, she would turn it into the 4 dragons formation, Malygos finally expressed his acquiescence with silence. After leaving the dragon race's spiritual network, Duque immediately looked at the data in the system prompt. In Si Thun's stomach he left not only an ordinary oxygen mask and a natural resistance shield, but also a small surveillance circle. It could monitor the condition of the tentacles in Si Thun's stomach. In theory, if history didn't trick him, Si Thun would enter a period of weakness after all the tentacles were knocked out. It was a rare opportunity to focus all their firepower. Any attack that hit Si Thun's body would cause more than double the damage. The timing was not easy to grasp. First of all, the scene must not be too chaotic. If the scene was too chaotic, it would be easy for a murder case to occur. If they could not even keep their lives, how could they talk about focusing fire? Secondly, it was to pick a time when Si Thun's previous batch of giant tentacles had been killed and the new giant tentacles had yet to appear. Finally, he had to dodge Si Thun's ultimate move. His kinetic death ray could instantly kill anyone it saw. Even Nozdormu, who was known to have the thickest skin, did not dare to take it head-on. Almost at the same second that Duque finished thinking, most people suddenly heard Si Thun's murmur. "You will die. Your heart is about to explode." This evil god's voice went straight to the heart, and almost every mortal hero was in a trance. The warriors and paladins in heavy armor were fine. They were not fast to begin with. For rogues who were most concerned about speed, this was simply fatal. Just then, a giant eye tentacle broke through the ground and rose from the ground with a crackling sound. As rogues, they needed to find a way to break the giant eye tentacles. Eye beam. This kind of chain lightning ray would constantly jump on everyone's body. Every time it jumped, the damage would double. Basically, the third person would die. This state of confusion immediately caused the team to lose members. 3 melee players actually chose the same target. All of this could have been avoided. At most, the moment they discovered it, the 2 furthest would just roll away. However, the ancient god's mental attack directly caused everyone to enter a state of soul paralysis. At that moment, Gavin Rad's face turned pale and he immediately activated his invincibility. Vanessa, who was the second to be attacked, immediately activated her shadow cloak. Although she was not immune to the ancient god's damage, it greatly reduced the damage she needed to take. The third one seemed to be a chieftain of the Forsaken. When the highly concentrated Iage hit him, the people around him were shocked to find that his entire body had turned green. His body, which was no longer decaying because of the shadow power, suddenly turned into a human figure that seemed to be made of green algae. The next second, his entire body scattered on the ground like quicksand. Only the sound of epic-grade equipment clashing against the gravel could be heard. On the other side, Grom was also hit. He, who always fought first in every battle, became the target of the giant claw's tentacles in a brief pause. The huge tentacles wrapped around his entire body, trying to grind him to pieces. This furious attack could be said to have used up all of Grom's strength and courage. At this moment, he was almost standing in the same position as what Oro had said. If the giant claw's tentacles were a few centimeters deeper, Orgrimmar would lose a living legend the next day. Tentacles were soft structures and did not have joints, but because the giant claw's tentacles had a hard claw-like structure, it had joint-like joints. Grom was betting on whether there were strong muscles there. If he did not make the right bet, I've lived enough, Master Howl said to himself in his heart. Living enough did not mean giving up. He used his remaining right hand to grip the handle of the axe tightly, and with a sudden knee strike, he hit the joint of the giant claw. Crack! An armor of Mount Hygel's level was indeed extraordinary. The leg armor violently hit the giant claw's hard shell full of barbs. Fortunately, his knee was not pierced into a sieve because he used the warrior's unique Fury attack, which even produced an effect similar to Thunder Strike. This gave him a precious opportunity. Even if it was only for a short moment, Blood Howl perfectly hit the joint of the hard shell on the tentacles. The sharp axe blade easily cut through the thick tentacles as if it was cutting through butter. It was a pity that when he jumped down he did not pay attention to his feet. Although the heavy boots had thick metal soles, this could not stop a hard claw from piercing through the soles and into the surface of his foot. He felt that the entire sole of his foot was completely pierced, and the pain was so great that he was twitching. Even when he pulled his foot out as fast as he could, Theon's holy light flash was still quickly applied to his head. He still knew that for a long time he would not be able to use his signature jumping slash. At this moment he suddenly saw the eyeballs in Si Thun's huge purple eyes begin to bulge. Everyone be careful, Si Thun is about to use Dark Flash. Chapter 1356. It seemed that Si Thun had also realized that fighting the wyverns was too much of a loss, and the combat power of the mortal heroes was unexpected. The mortals that it didn't pay attention to stopped its tentacles from harassing the 4 dragon aspects. Si Thun would definitely change this. More giant claws and tentacles emerged from the ground, and all kinds of tentacles entangled every existence that dared to resist its authority in their own way, regardless of whether they were small or not. Although the situation hadn't exceeded Duque's understanding of Thun, Duque knew that the so-called strategy could be thrown into the toilet and washed away. The number of tentacles was completely wrong, like King Forest. The most exaggerated thing was that the natural elemental magic in the surrounding air had increased exponentially. In contrast, the three most traditional elements of ice, fire and arcane magic in the pharaoh were repelled to the greatest extent. Thun was crushing all of the pharaoh, including Maligos and Duque, with his true god-level power. This was its lair, and it was in charge of what kind of place it was. Maligos was furious. This meant that if he wanted to play magic he would have to downgrade to the Breaking Dawn level. This was absolutely humiliating for him, who claimed to be the only ruler of the magic world. He immediately made a decision to give up the magic he was best at and instead pounced on Thun, biting and chopping off every tentacle that belonged to Thun. Not far away, Duque could clearly feel that at this moment, the laws of magic that all mages were familiar with were being forcibly distorted, leaving him in fear. Thun's chaotic and violent power was descending, and its irresistible power was dominating and taking over everything. Duque could hear the sound of the magic net collapsing in this area. The shattering sound in the soul's vision was even more unsettling and frightening than the earth-shattering roars in reality. Moreover, the magic net was the main part of Duque's main city as a god. The collapse of this part of the magic net was tantamount to cutting off at least 30% of Duque's strength in one go. Thun was very shrewd. Duque's face fell. A dragon aspect was still a dragon without magic. He was a demigod of magic who had ascended as a human. Could he really transform into the white-robed sword Saint Gandalf and stab him with the spiral sword? In the past, Duque had backstabbed so many strong enemies, and it was always successful because most of those enemies had something like the heart, a so-called vital point. Thun, the monster evil god, didn't have such a thing. The only way to kill it was to forcefully cut off its life force and beat it into a pile of shit. Duque's spiral sword was really not useful here. There was no such thing as an absolutely powerful profession in this world. Since his mystic level was suppressed, Duque had to find another way out. Master. What should we do? Please give us your instructions. Duque and the other elemental emissaries anxiously asked Duque through the soul connection. They were existences that used the elements as their life forms. If they lost the supply of elemental magic power, not only would their strength be greatly reduced, but they would also face the risk of their souls being annihilated. Duque said, "All of you return to the weave outside. Inject as much magic power as you can into my body before the weave here collapses. Take care." Alonce's veil seemed to want to persuade Duque, but in the end he could only say these two words. In the center of his field of vision, the huge eye of Thun was swelling more and more. The system prompt, "A high-energy attack is about to strike," was flashing non-stop. Everyone could see that dark flash was about to be released. Because there were too many tentacles, the scene was very chaotic. There were still people fighting the most threatening eyeball tentacles, but there were at least 3 more giant claw tentacles with stronger life force near the eye of Thun. The cruel giant claw tentacles twitched instinctively, attacking every living thing that passed by, and hitting something similar to the warrior profession's tendon break. This was a skill with a strong deceleration effect. In front of the world-destroying dark flash, this was undoubtedly the most vicious curse of death. They couldn't run, because they would have to watch helplessly as the crimson light that symbolized death swallowed them up. It wasn't just one person who was hit, but a total of 7. Magni could rely on Avatar, and Theon could use his invincibility to get rid of this damn debuff, but the remaining 5 couldn't escape no matter what. Ox Chief Cain, Grandpa Howl, Hadron Brightwing, Benedict, and Thrall, Dark Flash, began to shoot. Death rays as thick as the diameter of its eyeball surged out and hit the ground heavily. Countless insects crawled out of the gravel-filled ground and fled in all directions. Stones of all sizes spun strangely on the ground and danced in fear. Some tiny grains of sand even bounced up from the violent tremors and flew into the air. They first melted into glass under the ultra-high temperature, then turned into terrifying nothingness along with the insects that couldn't escape in time when the crimson destructive rays touched them. Cain's muscles bulged as he roared, trying to use brute force to resist the short-term deceleration effect of tendon break. With a smile on his face, Grom silently took over Magni's position, using his remaining arm to lift the tomahawk and block a giant claw tentacle. However, apart from them, everyone seemed to have accepted their impending fate. No matter what Benedict had in mind at this moment, he was a benevolent elder, continuing his treatment. After realizing that he had no chance to escape, Hadron stopped moving. He stood still and shot arrow after arrow. Thrall didn't act like a great chief at all. Instead, he acted like a pure warrior, madly slashing the tentacles in front of him. That's right. He was an orc first, then a warrior, and finally a great chief. An orc warrior, even if he knew he was going to die, he had to die on the way. No. Many tribal masters let out shrill cries, but their feet didn't stop. They could only instinctively follow the established tactics and run around Thun to avoid the invincible power of Dark Flash. They twisted their heads and stared at where Thrall was. For a moment, Woken's heart stopped beating. As Thrall's chief advisor, as a firm supporter of the tribe, Woken never hesitated to use the greatest malice to suspect and speculate on those who were against the tribe or once had a grudge against the tribe. Now what he was most worried about had happened. In front of him was a great opportunity for the Alliance to weaken the tribe. This was a coalition army formed to fight against the ancient evil gods, and it was also a war where the weak gathered to challenge the strong. If there were any casualties in such a difficult battle, it would be normal. Chapter 1357. The strength of the Alliance and the Horde was already disproportionate. Wajin couldn't imagine how much cohesion the Horde would have if they lost Grom, Kane and Sal. Maybe the Horde would not be destroyed, and maybe there would be new Horde heroes to lead the Horde. In any case, the decline of the Horde would be inevitable. If there was another big incident like the attack of the Swarm, maybe the Horde would have to join the Alliance again. The orcs in the old Horde had to wear slave collars because they were defeated. This time, the warriors of the Horde might have to wear slave collars themselves because they begged for the reproduction of the race. Perhaps the higher-ups of the Alliance would proclaim that this was an amalgamation of the races. Or perhaps a wise leader like Duke would play down the past grudges and not wear any humiliating marks on the Horde. But to the warriors of the Horde, this decision itself was like a slave collar. Suffocation, terror, uneasiness, all kinds of negative emotions surged into Wajin's heart. Heroes could not be replicated. If Duke really had a way to not use it, Wajin didn't dare to imagine it anymore. The first landing point of the Dark Flash was far away from Duke. According to Thun's current rhythm of sweeping 180 degrees clockwise in a semicircle, Duke only needed to lift his legs and run 2 steps to reach the safe zone. The shock of the Horde's powerhouses fell into Duke's eyes. He didn't say a word and watched this scene coldly. Duke knew that as the biggest core of the Alliance's formation, his every move would be a signal. It could even be said that if he ordered to clean up the Horde first, except for a few upright people like Tyrion Fordring, most of the Alliance's powerhouses would be happy to immediately turn around and eliminate the unstable factor of the Horde first. Even if the Alliance and the Horde had cooperated for the 3rd time in the Battle of Calamity, Mount Hyjal, and the Battle of the Swarm, presumably no one would forget the hatred between the Alliance and the Horde. Even if it was a tragedy caused by drinking demon blood by mistake and maliciously led by people with ill intentions, having a reason to forgive did not mean that it would definitely be forgiven. However, at this moment Duke had a feeling of being in a trance. It was the feeling of standing at the crossroads of history and controlling fate. There had never been such a clear feeling of one person controlling the fate of millions of people from the 2 major forces, or even all the living beings on planet Azeroth. Perhaps it would be more beneficial for the Alliance to let Sal die here and let the tribe become a pile of loose sand. The Alliance that had swallowed up the Horde might be even more focused on fighting against the Burning Legion and the ancient gods. Perhaps this was what Duke as a human should do. However, at this time Duque felt that it was pointless to do so. Wasn't the world of Azeroth exciting precisely because of the war epics written by heroes? Wasn't it precisely because of the strategy of inclusiveness that there were hundreds of races gathered together, regardless of race, occupation, age, or gender? What if he did? Wouldn't that be going against the flow of the world? Duque suddenly laughed because he suddenly remembered his original identity, an insignificant citizen of the Celestial Empire. Since such a large Celestial Empire could be inclusive of 56 races, Why couldn't the leader of a small alliance with only tens of millions of people do the same? Duque walked towards the safe zone according to the prearranged tactics. For some reason in the eyes of others, Duque did not take a step back. The power of fairness and love nurtured in Duque's heart seemed to erupt at this moment, forming a towering flag in the illusory spiritual world. Duque made his move. Even though his strength had temporarily fallen to the breaking dawn level because of Si Thun's forceful removal of the weave and other elements, he was still a well-deserved expert here. A longbow made of pure holy light suddenly appeared in his hand. Queen Sylvanas looked at it in surprise because the shape of this bow was the bow she and Duque had used to shoot arrows together when the cataclysm invaded the Well of the Sun. The slender and sharp spiral sword turned into the sharpest arrow and was knocked on the bowstring. Every move of Duque's was very fast, but every ranger, including Queen Sylvanas, felt very awkward when they saw it. After all, Duque did not know how to shoot arrows. He was purely copying Queen Sylvanas' posture when she shot the arrow that day purely from memory. Although it was elegant and efficient for a female elf to use such a posture, if it was a rough man, it would be a little too horrible to look at. The posture was not the main point. The main point was that Duque could actually forcibly grasp the knack of archery through imitation. The bowstring vibrated. The next moment, an arrow suddenly appeared beside the giant claw that Grom and Sar were fighting with. The golden arrow perfectly pierced through the gap in the shell of the giant claw. The golden arrow tore through flesh and blood, and the stinky liquid split the black void like a line, and then turned into a bloody mist. After the golden spiral arrow, or rather the spiral sword, shot through the huge tentacle before the terrifying light of dark flash touched it, it made the smallest 180-degree turn in the air. Then, under the guidance of Duque's power, it flew back along the periphery of Si Thun's body in an arc. The 5 trapped people couldn't help but have a thought. When did the Alliance have a god of archery? Before they could think too much, Queen Sylvanas had personally demonstrated and shot the second arrow. This time, Queen Sylvanas had used all her strength to shoot the arrow, aiming at it. Originally, Queen Sylvanas' attack alone was not enough. At the critical moment, a claw popped out from the Emerald Dream and fiercely added another hit. The giant claw that wrapped around Cain fell 1 second later. Go! Duque's stern voice came from afar. You make it sound so easy. Grom complained, which was rare for him. That's right. How to go? The 5 of them still had at least 3 seconds of broken tendon. But Si Thun's ultimate skill only needed 1 second at most. At this moment, they were pleasantly surprised to find that the ground under their feet had turned into ice. The next moment, the ice suddenly bounced up obliquely. They were like marbles bounced off a spring, and their whole bodies flew out of the safe zone. The powerhouses on both sides caught the 5 who were bounced off. Hadron! Queen Sylvanas shouted. Great Chief! Woken was extremely surprised. Duque's action showed his attitude. Not only would he not give up Hadron and Benedicta's, the 2 seemingly second-tier heroes in the Alliance, but he even intended to save Sar, the 3 core figures of the Horde. Not only the Alliance but even the powerhouses of the Horde felt the power of Duque's will. Magni, who passed by Duque, sighed slightly. His nose actually felt sour. Chapter 1358. This was the faith that mortals had towards the light. The young man named Duque, his country and his companions had unknowingly surpassed Thoradin the Great, who had been revered as a saint for 2,800 years because he had teamed up with the High Elves to expel the Trolls. He had walked to the forefront of the era. Magni sighed. If the many living beings in Azeroth could survive, perhaps the name Duke Marcus would become an eternal legend. William happened to be running near Magni and suddenly asked, Uncle Magni, can I really become a great leader like Uncle Marcus in the future? Magni laughed. In his God's Descent state, he ran with big strides and laughed heartily. Silly boy. There is only one Duke Marcus and there is only one William Wrynn. Moreover, mortals are mortals and gods are gods. Before you have the ability to step into the divine realm, why do you care so much? You're just asking for trouble. William was stunned. Suddenly, the confusion that had been stuck in his heart for a long time was solved. Yes, every existence in the world was unique. No one would be a degraded copy of another. William was William. As long as he did his best and had a clear conscience, it would be fine. Moreover, if the gap was too big, he would lose the heart to catch up. Mortals were destined to look up to the divine realm. On the other side, Thrall, who had been saved, looked at Duque with an incomparably complicated expression. Logically speaking, he should hate Duque. It was precisely because of this man's incomparably outstanding and even era-transcending wisdom that led to the defeat of the old tribe and caused hundreds of thousands of orcs to become slaves. He who hadn't personally participated in the Battle of the Dark Portal and World War II, could shout, "Orcs will never be slaves," without hesitation. This heroic statement might be praised by the tribe for thousands of years, but he couldn't say half a sentence like, "Duque, I hate you." Resentment? Perhaps. But at this moment there was more admiration. While running, Thrall's mouth that was full of fangs squirmed for a long time before he asked, "Why? Do you think it's because we are true allies? Did we swear to protect each other? Or do you mean that I'm a good person, a great saint?" Duque smiled. "Neither." Thrall suddenly gritted his teeth. "Orgrim told me. You had personally ordered assassins to assassinate me when I was still a baby. He's just a weak baby." For a moment, the experts on both sides almost suspected that Sal was going to fight with Duque. Duque's tone changed and his words became sonorous. "I never intended to deny it. At that time, a completely destroyed tribe was more beneficial to the Alliance. If I was in power at that time, I would have slaughtered all the captives of the tribe, just like how the tribe slaughtered all the civilians in every human village in the Elven Forest." The air suddenly froze. Sal did not know how to continue. At this moment, Duque's facial muscles suddenly softened. But that's all in the past. The current relationship between the Alliance and the Horde had nothing to do with justice, pity, or hatred. Allies? The benevolence of a saint? Sorry, of course I won't say such superficial words. If you have to ask me for an answer, I will tell you that this is the need of the world. The need of the world. Sal was a little confused. Don't worry. If I choose to attack the Horde one day, it will be because the conflict between the Alliance and the Horde cannot be reconciled, and I will do it at least 3 days after the Horde receives the official declaration of war. Perhaps one day in the future I will kill you and perhaps you will kill me. In this world where even the Titans who are known as gods can fall, nothing is immortal. Duque's words were shocking. Not only Sal but all the experts of the Alliance and the Horde around him lost the ability to speak. Please remember. You and I may fight each other and die a violent death. The forces you and I represent may tear up the Alliance and become enemies. But not today. Yes, not yesterday. Maybe tomorrow. But not today. Not today. This sentence itself contained a mysterious attitude. An attitude that could make both sides feel relieved. Maybe tomorrow they would become mortal enemies again, but not today. Maybe tomorrow they would perish, but not today. There might be a lot of bad luck and misfortune in the future, but definitely not today. Today was destined to be a memorable day for mortals. Because today would be a great victory day for mortals and demigods. Because today would be the day of victory for the allied forces of many races to overthrow the dark ancient evil god Si-Thun. Sarl laughed loudly and waved the burning hammer of destruction. "Haha. Duke Marcus. I admire you, let's go together. Kill this disgusting guy." Duque also smiled and waved the spinning golden sword in his hand. "Huh. Sal, I also admire you and I used to want to kill you." But not only Sal and Duque, but even the experts of the Alliance and the Horde who heard the conversation between the two big shots shouted in unison. "Not today," when Si-Thun's dark flash drew a 180-degree arc and stopped helplessly without any success. The experts of the Alliance and the Horde burst out with the greatest enthusiasm and combat power, bravely pouncing on their targets. The space that could be moved around shrank once again. The 4 dragon aspects and a slightly smaller black dragon with Si-Thun as the center occupied an average of 5 directions. Duque's words were also heard by the 4 dragon aspects. Alexstrasza and Isra nodded at Duque. They agreed with his words. Nozdormu was deep in thought. Only Maligos was still unhappy. Perhaps in the future, it will be difficult for so many dragon aspects to gather together to deal with the ultimate evil. Regardless of whether we have conflicts with each other, I still want to say, not today. Yes, today was a day to work together. Tomorrow's conflicts would be dealt with tomorrow. Maligos spat fiercely and finally nodded at Alexstrasza. Every battlefield in the hall was ignored by the dragons and Duque, and all the tentacles were left to the mortals to deal with. Only the heads of the dragons were left. The dragon's head was ferocious and uneven, the dragon's eyes emitted a blazing light, and the fangs that were slightly exposed were glowing fiercely. The entire dragon's mental network was dead silent, as if the world had come to a standstill at this moment. It made others hallucinate as if these huge dragons were just sculptures or decorations. All the distracting thoughts eventually returned to nothingness, and the soft breathing sound of the dragons spread like ripples. Unknowingly, every dragon's breath came together. The same frequency, the same weight. Chapter 1359. A bolt of lightning zigzagged across the dark hemispherical space, and the dark void suddenly boiled like porridge. A five-colored spot of light suddenly appeared 100 meters above the eye of Xian. Like a falling stone hitting the mirror-like surface of a lake, a circle of ripples appeared in the air, and the five-colored circle spread out to a radius of at least 500 meters. Even the poisonous circle summoned by Xian was forced to retreat. A soft woo-woo sound was heard. This is... Kalia's voice was a little cautious. I know. It's the Dragon Clan's formation, right? Jaina was a little excited as she watched this scene happen. Every powerhouse in the fierce battle noticed the changes above their heads. Their movements were a little distorted due to excitement, and most of them took the time to look up, but they had to retract their gaze and focus on the battle. Not everyone had the spare time to appreciate the huge shadow that gradually emerged from the five-colored circle of light. It was a majestic palace. It was silver-white, inlaid with gold-edged carvings everywhere, with complex and thick Greek-style columns, and a holy palace covered with snow. However, this temple was upside down. It was as if it formed a mirror image of Xian on the ground. When everyone saw the towering temple gradually transforming from a shadow to reality, and saw those translucent illusory ancient dragons wandering around the inverted temple, they finally realized what kind of palace it was. It's the Dragon Slumber Temple. The dragon aspect actually summoned the Dragon Slumber Temple. The sudden appearance of the strange temple finally affected the entire battlefield, and even Xian could not help but turn his huge eyes to stare at the uninvited guest that suddenly broke in from midair. More and more colors of light flickered in the dark void, like the light of stars twinkling. Every time a five-colored light flashed, a mighty and majestic dragon with shining scales was left behind. Red dragon, blue dragon, green dragon, bronze dragon, and even the legendary black dragon that had left the Dragon Slumber Temple. These illusory dragon projections pushed aside Xian's poisonous fog and completely spread out over the dark hemispherical space with a radius of 1,000 meters. After the light flickered, a vast sea of dragons appeared in the sky. Every dragon was glowing with holy light. It even seemed like a titan in the pantheon was standing at a higher place among the dragons, looking at the twisted and hideous Xian with a majestic gaze. The battlefield was silent for a moment. In the next moment, a clear and melodious dragon roar resounded throughout this dark underground world. In the north, the Red Dragon Queen raised her head high and spoke in Draconic. In the name of the Titans of the Pantheon, I, Alexstrasza, swear to lead the Red Dragon race to protect the purity of life on planet Azeroth. The alarm in Xian's heart rang. In just a moment of daze, it discovered that it had lost control of part of the corrosive evil divine power around it. His connection with the divine powers had been severed. Originally, he relied on the corrosion star soul to forcefully extract the life force of the planet, allowing him to become an existence that even the Pantheon Hall couldn't deal with. At this moment, it found that its control area in the crust was invaded by a ball of green flames. It was clearly like a ball of raging flames, but it allowed the underground space that had been exhausted due to its excessive extraction of power to show life again. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The entire depths of the crust swayed gently. Then Malygos, Nozdormu, and Isra made their oaths one after another. Under the witness of the sleeping dragon temple, each oath would deepen the bond between the dragon aspect and the planet, making it stronger and more able to evoke the resonance of the will of planet Azeroth. It could be said that the Guardian Oath was the source of the dragon aspect's power. Malygos mobilized the elements of this world. Nozdormu consolidated the time and space lines of the planet. Isra eliminated the evil dreams, wills, as much as possible. Under the witness of the sleeping dragon temple, each oath would deepen the bond between the dragon aspect and the planet, making it stronger and more able to evoke the resonance of the will of planet Azeroth. It could be said that the Guardian Oath was the source of the dragon aspect's power. At this time it was Onyxia's turn. If she had a choice, Alexstrasza did not want to put this weak-willed junior last. That was because the pressure on her was the greatest at the beginning and the end. It couldn't be helped. The will of the planet started with living beings and ended with the Earth as the carrier. Who asked the original Nesario to be so powerful? The father had fallen, and the daughter had turned from a traitor to a loyal subject. How strong could her will be? There was no way to fake it in front of the will of the planet, so Onyxia's oath sounded very spineless. In the name of the prophet of my lord's fate, the demigod of the Azeroth weave, Duke Marcus I Onyxia, am a dragon that obeys the will of my lord. In accordance with the guardian will of my lord, I will protect the land of Azeroth. Weak. Very weak. You're so weak, aren't you? She did not have her own will at all. Even in her declaration she only claimed that she was a pure thug. What she meant was, I'm just a worker. Don't look for me if there's nothing important. Even if the sky falls, my lord will hold it up. Alexstrasza and Isra rolled their eyes when they heard this. The other two didn't look happy. Nozdormu bared his teeth and Maligos spat. Onyxia ignored them all and pretended not to hear. Anyway, protecting the world has nothing to do with me. I'm just a slacker. I'm forced to be a mount because I want to live. I'm being ridden day and night because I want to live. If the side of justice is the victor, I don't mind being the messenger of justice. Her oath was weak, so the response given by the will of the planet was naturally weak. It was on a completely different level from the previous 4 dragon aspects. If Duque had not held the line at the end, the Red Dragon Queen would probably have announced the change to the 4-dragon formation. Duque stood at the junction of Onyxia's neck and back. His feet seemed to have grown roots as he stood firmly on the shiny black dragon scales. The cloak behind him fluttered even though there was no wind. His tiger lips moved slightly and a clear voice sounded. I, Duke Marcus, hereby swear, I don't care who you are and I don't care what you want to do. Whether it's the Supreme Demon King or the evil ancient god that has taken root on the planet. Since you're in Azeroth, you have to listen to the rules of Azeroth. Or else, or get lost, or die. The simple and violent oath caused the shadows of the entire dragon's slumber temple to buzz. Then the oath became an echo circulating again and again in the vibration of the laws, becoming louder and louder. First, it resounded through the entire Ahn'Qiraj temple, then Silithus, and finally it seemed to shake through the entire planet of Azeroth. Chapter 1360. Critically ill patients squeezed out abscesses, cut off flesh, and even severed limbs in order to find a chance of survival. It was like a patient with advanced diabetes who knew that his leg had rotted, but was still unwilling to amputate it. This kind of decision was never an easy thing to make. Ever since the ancient gods corroded planet Azeroth, absorbing nutrients at the cost of the planet's destruction in exchange for their own growth, this beautiful planet seemed to have fallen into an endless cycle. If the planet wanted to be healthy, these ancient gods had to be removed. However, removing the ancient gods also meant that planet Azeroth, which had been deeply corroded by the souls and power of the ancient gods, had a high chance of being destroyed. Even Amun'Thul, the boss of the Pantheon, could not make the decision to completely destroy the ancient gods. In the end, he used sealing methods to seal the ancient gods, praying that as time passed, there would be a better way to deal with it. The reason why Duque dared to confront Thun so head-on was because he had provided the planet's will with a solution. When Alexstrasza's life force was injected into Thun's territory in the planet's crust, Thun was completely enraged. The ancient gods had been fighting for territory since tens of thousands of years ago, when there were no historical records, until they were sealed during the War of Domination 25,000 years ago. On the land, on the only continent of ancient Kalimdor, the various proxy races were fighting each other. In the depths of the earth, the forces of each other were constantly clashing. Alexstrasza, with her mere demigod body, rushed in with that little power, and purified the entire territory of Thun, bringing vitality to such a vast area. This was as ridiculous as using a drop of water to purify a large bottle of ink. Thun was really angry. The turbid and evil underground world was like a triggered trap, operating rapidly. From the layers of seemingly ordinary rock formations. From the quiet and peaceful underground river. From the unexpected cracks and holes. Countless forces were used, finally forming an unimaginably huge mass of polymer. If Alexstrasza's power was a pool of pure water, then the huge figure of the evil divine power that gradually emerged was a deep pool that could not be purified. In the crust there was an incredible landscape everywhere. The infinitely distorted evil will and corrosive slurry constantly mutated in the huge underground space, forming a chaotic landscape of eternal change. It frantically surrounded and suppressed the wisp of green that dared to shoot into the underground world, destroying the only life aura that dared to invade the underground world in the past 25,000 years. Compared to the monster under the Ankh-Karaj temple, which was called Thun by the Karaj insect people in the insect people language, what the mortal warriors of the Alliance and the Horde saw now was just the tip of the iceberg. At that very moment, in a place deeper than the Earth's crust, in the deepest depths of the Earth, some life seemed to have been awakened. Not only Thun's mind and divine power amalgamated in the Earth's crust, but even the coalition soldiers far away on the surface clearly felt a chilling anger gushing from the deepest part of the Earth. This is... Alexstrasza was stunned. At first she didn't understand why Duque wanted her to send 30% of her power into Thun's nest. Now she understood a little. The magma was hot enough to destroy everything. Every living planet had its own active liquid core, a large part of which was magma. With the movement of the Earth's crust, the planet would always vent the excess energy deep in the Earth's core in the form of volcanic eruptions from time to time. In Azeroth, the most typical place was the Ungoro crater. It happened to be the intersection of the two continental plates. What Duque did was actually to remind the hazy will of the planet that it could make its own eruptions slightly deviate. Yes. While Alexstrasza was luring Thun's power together, she could directly spew magma from the depths of the Earth's core and annihilate Thun's main force. Now it seemed that this idea was successful. Thun's simple thinking allowed Alexstrasza, with her mere demigod power, to complete a feat similar to using a fishing rod to lift a whale. Hundreds of millions of tons of lava sprayed at high speed onto Thun's divine power polymer in the Earth's crust, and Thun in the Ankh-Karaj temple suddenly let out a shrill cry. With this as a signal, Theon, who was in his stomach, raised Ashbringer high up and slashed down with all his strength. In the eyes of every hero who was fighting fiercely, Thun's body expanded by at least half its size, lightning flashed in its body, and every eyeball tentacle that squeezed out of the ground randomly released lightning similar to eye edge. Its huge and hideous and twisted body became astonishingly bright, giving off a strange sense of transparency. At the same time, it gave people a premonition that it would collapse at any time. An ancient god was indeed an ancient god. Thun was indeed a super boss that destroyed countless guilds in the early versions of World of Warcraft. Even though the largest group of divine power in its nest continued to be destroyed, in a situation that was almost equivalent to a human's heart being pierced, it still didn't die immediately. Instead, its ferocity was aroused. A huge tentacle that was twice the size of an ordinary giant claw tentacle drilled out of the ground and fiercely swept its claws at the place where the mortal heroes were the most concentrated. Just lying on the ground, the tentacle was nearly 2 stories high, and it swept over with the momentum that could sweep an entire street with one blow. Such a wide area of indiscriminate attack made all dodging meaningless. The plate armor with higher defense showed its true value at this moment. The paladins and warriors wearing heavy iron cans could at least be hit like flying balls. An undead thief was smashed into pieces the moment it was hit. The other lich's blue and white ice barrier had just lit up when, in the next instant, the high-density ice elemental barrier couldn't withstand the powerful attack, and the entire ice block exploded with a blazing white light before shattering with a loud bang. Not only the ice block but the entire body of the lich along with the ice block shattered into powder-like small pieces, annihilated in this dark underground space. But this was the last victim of the Battle of the Ankh-Karaj temple. It was at this moment that the earth suddenly shook. Apart from Duque and the will of planet Azeroth, no other existence discovered that after the underground magma destroyed the largest mass of divine power of Thun, it once again gathered in a whirlpool in one direction. In the center of the whirlpool, after the dark red light had accumulated to the extreme, it suddenly lit up and burst out with a brilliance that was no less than the sun's rays. With a loud boom, a fiery red pillar of light burst out from the ground where Si Thun's base was located. This lava spike was like a red-hot fork piercing Si Thun from the bottom up in the blink of an eye. It was like a kebab with a piece of meat on it held high. Without even half a second of hesitation, the 5-color guardian dragons activated the dragon slumber formation, and the illusory dragons injected their own dragon breath into the inverted dragon slumber temple. A brilliant 5-colored brilliance suddenly rose from the temple, and from top to bottom, it blasted into Si Thun's big eyeball. It was an amazing scene that countless mortals would never have the opportunity to see in their lifetime. The dazzling brilliance in the underground cave radiated in all directions, not only dispelling the surrounding darkness, but the brilliance was also like the dawn, washing away the darkness. Even the light penetrated through the thick rock layers, bathing the entire Silithus desert in this light. Hundreds of thousands of coalition soldiers were fortunate enough to witness the last moments of a true evil god. The remains of Si Thun, which had been rushed into the air by the lava fountain, welcomed the final blow of Alun, the goddess of the moon. A burst of starlight and moonlight flashed. Immediately, the entire disgusting mass of meat began to fall apart like a sandcastle blown away by a gust of wind. Then, in the blink of an eye, an immeasurable amount of power of heaven and earth broke out of Si Thun's body, even tearing his body into pieces, turning it into a bloody mist that filled the sky, dissipating in the almost never-ending desert storm of Silithus. Chapter 1361. I, Duke Marcus, in my capacity as the Supreme Commander of the Alliance, declare. I, Sal, in my capacity as the Chief of the Horde, declare. 2 voices, in different languages, simultaneously synchronized in every magic communication channel and broadcast on every magic loudspeaker. The cruel ancient evil god Si Thun has been defeated by the combined forces of the dragons, the Alliance and the Horde. The moment the 2 broadcasts stopped, there was a very brief silence, as if a god had come and zipped everyone's mouth, forbidding them from speaking. After a short pause, the gears of time began to turn again. In a flash, loud cheers erupted in every corner of Silithus at the same time. In the emotionless desert, it seemed that every grain of sand was instantly heated up by the enthusiasm of the people, and even the air was boiling. Ah, dead. Dead. Who asked you to show off? What ancient god? To hell with it. Bah. Bastard, can you see it in heaven? I, your father, have avenged you. Who was laughing and celebrating? Who was crying sadly? The news of Si Thun's annihilation spread throughout Silithus in the shortest amount of time, as if it had grown wings. Then through magic it spread to Theramore and Orgrimmar, which were thousands of miles away. It crossed the endless sea and reached the Eastern Kingdom. Hundreds of thousands of allied soldiers shouted wildly, their tears and smiles mixed together, but it did not seem out of place at all. The Tauren carried the gnome on his neck as if it was a normal thing. Orcs and humans put their arms around each other's shoulders. Trolls and dwarves looked at each other and danced. All the incredible things before the war happened at this moment. When Duque announced that the war was over and that hundreds of tons of wine would be shipped, the atmosphere reached its peak. Duque had long foreseen the fall of Si Thun, and under the premise of meeting the military needs, he secretly prepared a celebration ceremony. When hundreds of portals opened at the various gathering points of Silithus soldiers, when the tavern attendants were transferred over to push barrels of fine wine through the portals and open the barrels, letting the overflowing aroma of wine spread in all directions, not a single warrior could control himself. Don't push. Don't push. Line up. Even the Alliance tribe has a share. With the Holy Knights maintaining order and millions of gold coins opening the way, Thrall, who saw this scene in the magic mirror, was shocked by Duque's generosity. The scorching lava was erupting more than 10 steps away, but under the cover of the large ice base that Duque had constructed with the frost element, not a single bit of heat was transmitted to him. Instead there was a faint chill giving off a surreal feeling. Sal turned his head. Duque, did you foresee Si Thun's fall long ago? Duque pursed his lips. No. However, I think that at least if we fail and have to wait for death, we can still drink away our sorrows. Humph. I don't believe a single word you're saying now. Duque shrugged. Whether you believe it or not, I believe it myself. He had seen scoundrels before, but he had never seen such a scoundrel. Sal suddenly realized that his cultivation was not enough. Sal scratched his head and was about to say something when Watkins stopped him. As a great chief, once the battle was over, there would be a lot of things to do. At this time, Jaina came over, pulled on Duque's sleeve and said in a voice that sounded like a dream, "Hey, Duque, is Si Thun dead?" Duque raised his head, then twisted his slightly sore neck. Since the beginning of human civilization, we have always wanted to kill all the rats and cockroaches, but what happened? Jaina's face suddenly turned a little ugly. This result is terrible. Duque, however, shook his head and smiled. You missed a lot of things. From the point of view of the continuation of life, no existence can completely destroy a divine creature that can reproduce infinitely. Then, from the point of view of the gods, although Si Thun is not completely finished, it has completely lost its territory and foundation. In all senses, it is no different from being finished. It has already been eliminated from this multi-party game around planet Azeroth. Forget about reviving and coming back, it's still unknown whether the other ancient gods will let it go. Enzoth, Yogg-Saron and the others were not good people. In the eyes of mortals, the defeated Si Thun had no value other than contributing equipment. In the eyes of the other ancient gods, Si Thun's remaining chaos divinity and divine spark fragments were the greatest treasure trove. Unfortunately, those things were also toxic to Duque, so he could only let those guys take advantage of them. As the greatest reflection of a god's characteristics, divinity had the deepest level of the god's will imprint, and was definitely the most troublesome. Although Duque could purify those divinities, it was extremely not cost-effective. This was like extracting beneficial substances from a pile of feces. In theory there were drops, but who would be willing to extract them? How much effort and energy would be wasted? This was a big problem in itself. As for the divine spark fragment, this thing was the upper limit of divine power that a god could contain. In theory it was also a good thing, but Duque still politely declined it. Because the direction Si Thun was going was not in line with Duque's. A small corrosive element in Logia? What the hell was that? Duque did not need those things. What Duque really wanted was... Suddenly, in the underground space that had been blown open, everyone felt an inexplicable throbbing. Whether it was the mortal heroes or the guardian dragons that were supposed to be high and mighty, they all raised their heads one by one. Suddenly they felt that they had temporarily lost contact with the power that they were familiar with. What was reflected in their vision was a still world. The wind was still, and every grain of dust that was blown by the wind was still in a spinning position. There was neither the agitation of the elements, nor the passage of time. They watched the faint light of the sun pouring down from the hole in the dome, and it was a warm scene. The sudden sense of loss after losing their powers did not bring them panic. The biggest reason was that a sense of tranquility and warmth filled their hearts. That was the feeling of a mother. The next moment time seemed to flow again. Everything in the world seemed to be in high spirits because of the arrival of a will. To be precise, it was not a single will. It was more like an amalgamation of countless wills. Some were living, some were determined to be dead by mortals, and there were also many wills of wandering souls. All the wills gathered together, forming a relatively unified will. At this moment, this will said a sentence in the common language. "Thank you, Duke Marcus." Then this will disappeared without a trace. Phew. Duque let out a long turbid breath. This is what I wanted. Chapter 1362. What kind of existence was a planet's will, or commonly known as a star soul? This was a very general topic and no one could explain it clearly. Duque had read countless ancient books in Karazhan, but there were not many records about the planet's will. Obviously it was not the only case that planet Azeroth had a will. In some cases, the planet only had a very vague concept of survival. However, Duque noticed that there were traces of a star soul on a planet that Medivh had personally set foot on. Unfortunately, that star soul had been defeated and perished in the face of the Burning Legion's invasion. The most crucial part of this record was that at the last moment the star soul had fought for survival, or perhaps it was for the most thorough resistance. It did something that seemed exaggerated but Duque felt was reasonable. The star soul had bet everything on a mortal hero. That guy was like a lottery jackpot, obtaining a full set of luxurious equipment, including 3 middle-grade artifacts in just a week. Then that guy became the otherworld's version of Long Outyen, forming an army of 1 million people in a month to fight against the Burning Legion. Unfortunately, it was unknown whether the Star Soul itself was too weak, or that the otherworld's Long Outyen was not talented enough. Anyway, after that guy killed 2 high-level Void Lords in one go, Archimonde directly attacked and smashed him into pieces. A vigorous war of resistance also ended with the victory of evil. Planet Azeroth was valued by the Pantheon, and there was definitely a reason why the Titan boss Amon Thul did not hesitate to let those blind ancient gods go to protect planet Azeroth. Perhaps if Duque had transmigrated a little later, he would have known about this history in the later versions of the game. The problem was that there were no ifs in this world. One day, Duque's brain would run out of information about transmigrators. Then when faced with an unknown fate, the best choice was to strengthen himself. Duque did not know if the planet's will would reward him for helping planet Azeroth kill Thun, or how much it would give him. At the very least, it would be good to have a good impression of the planet's will. What if it gets excited or anxious and wants to find some demigod hero to pass on his peerless skills to me, Duque? I don't mind being Zhou Xian. Of course, as a transmigrator and a newly advanced demigod with a brain, Duque would never put all his eggs in one basket. If it really did turn over, it would be a complete loss. There was no need to deliberately curry favor with the will of planet Azeroth. It would be good if there were benefits, but there was nothing to complain about if there were no benefits. After all, the path of the gods was basically a dark path. Thun and the other ancient gods were so powerful, but didn't they still fall, get sealed and get beaten up? The seemingly omnipotent titans of the Pantheon Palace who claimed to be eternal were also killed to the point where not even their seeds were left. In the original history, the mortal heroes of Azeroth had a final battle with the resurrected Sargeras. It could be foreseen that the resurrected Sargeras would have an almost invincible divine power. This Sargeras would even be at his peak. Blindly focusing on the path of the titans of the Pantheon Palace would not be able to defeat such a Sargeras. Duque pondered for a long time before he figured out a truth. Now, the various powers that the mortal heroes of Azeroth had mastered, such as the anger of the warriors, the energy of the thieves and the magic of the pharaoh. From another perspective, this was also a microcosm of the laws and territories mastered by the higher-level masters. Perhaps the two of them had always been one. Taking the Burning Legion as an example, they basically deduced the power of shadow and fire from dark energy. On this basis, the Eridar warlocks appeared, and then there were the so-called Death Knights and Demon Hunters and other branches. If one used the weak and one-sided power system mastered by mortals to work backwards, they might eventually be able to trace back to the origin of the power of this universe. From Duque's point of view, this was the most reliable and practical path to the pinnacle of power. This path seemed to take the longest detour, but it was the most dependable, and one would not be fooled by the so-called predecessors. It was a pity that the way to embark on this path was to keep trying. Just like the scientists before he transmigrated, they would constantly face failure in almost endless attempts, and then learn from each setback, constantly perfecting themselves and finally open the door to the pinnacle of power in the universe. To find such a key in this vast universe was not a chore that could be described with the word difficult. To be honest, even Duque himself was not confident that he would succeed. But he could already predict what the future would be like. Either he could directly surpass the limits of the world, dismantle the distorted void and beat up Sargeras. Or, actually, the upper limit of the power system of Azeroth was very high. Even if it did not work out, he could go with the flow and convince Xing Hun to release the upper limit of power in advance, and nurture a large number of demigods in advance. At that time, a large number of demigods would be wearing full sets of divine equipment. That glorious orange light, even if they could not fight, could frighten the Burning Legion's Void Lords to the point that they could not take care of themselves. But if he were to take this path, many would still have to train. At this moment, after confirming the fall of Thun, the 4 dragon aspects, led by Alexstrasza, turned into human forms and walked over. The Red Dragon Queen circled one hand around Duque's neck, and without a care in the world, she stuck Duque under her armpit. Oh, Duque boy, we really look at you in a different light. I didn't expect you to be able to support the Wormwrist Matrix through Onyxia, and even communicate with the will of the planet. Hehe, actually, the Wormrus Temple has a dragonification spell. Are you interested? Get lost. I'm doing well as a magic demigod for humans and elves. I'm not going to be your subordinate. And that thing can at most turn a human into a half-dragon, right? It's useless. No. It's very useful, at least I can see you with a tail growing out of your butt. Damn, what kind of bad taste was this? Alright, seeing that Alexstrasza had used the dragon's peak to stare at his face, he felt quite good, so a gentleman like Duque decided to bear with it. Thank you again, Duque. Isra came up and politely bowed to Duque. You're welcome. If you could control the more radical druids, I would be very grateful. Duque glanced at Fandral Staghelm, who had been acting like a bystander throughout the entire process. Since Tyron was unwilling to attack this fellow, Duque could not directly attack him. But Duque was quite willing to give Fandral some trouble. I will. Although Isra did not quite understand, he still agreed. Chapter 1363. According to the knowledge of the Night Elf Druids, the Druid doctrine originated from the demigod Cenarius. The forest demigod Cenarius was the embodiment of the natural life essence of Azeroth. Very few people knew of the deep relationship between Cenarius and the Emerald Dream Dragon Queen Isra. In many people's impression, the two were lovers, but in reality, Isra was Cenarius' adoptive mother. Giving Fandral a little trouble was just that. Duque did not have the mood to deal with Fandral Staghelm. After all, with Fandral's status, it was no longer worth Duque to deal with him personally. The dragon aspects were all very busy. It was already very rare for Duke to make use of the time difference to get them to help him out. Protecting planet Azeroth was a mission that was branded into their souls. Unless their entire dragon soul was corroded like Nesario, that sense of mission would naturally drive them to fulfill their duty of protection. Don't let me find out that you're abusing magic. Malygos still disliked Duque no matter what. Seeing as they had fought Thun to death together, Malygos was already giving him face by not flaring up on the spot. Alexstrasza was just about to say something, but Malygos had already waved his hand, opened a portal and ran away. Sorry, he's just like that. The Red Dragon Queen was a little embarrassed. It's fine, I'm used to it. Duque looked in the direction where Malygos had disappeared and took a deep look. The second to run was the Bronze Dragon King. I'll look for you if there's anything. Yes, if you collect those bugs, remember to take care of them. If they run to the Tanaris Desert again, I'll hold you accountable. Nozdormu was very straightforward. He turned into a cloud of yellow sand and disappeared in the open space. This time, Duque touched his nose, a little embarrassed. Duque noticed that in the system notification, there was a message about the Kiraji twin emperors looking for him. In the fierce battle with Thun just now, Duque naturally eliminated all factors that would interfere with his battle. The affairs of the magic net were all handed over to Karthika. Everything else was even more, don't look for me if there's anything and don't look for me if there's nothing. Now that a bunch of deities were pulling him aside to talk, he had no time to care about them. The remaining two female dragon aspects were easy to talk to. Duque, I really have to thank you this time. Isra, with her eyes closed, gave Duque the impression that she was a gentle girl no matter when he looked at her. Of course, in reality, Isra wasn't that weak. Duque suddenly thought of something. It was a scene that should have happened in history but did not happen in this world. That's right. What's up with the four guardians of the Emerald Dream, Laythorn, Amelise, Taylor and Isidri recently? Duque seemed to mention something that made no sense. Isra tilted his head and showed a curious expression. That's strange. You have almost no contact with druids and you don't know anything about the Emerald Dream. How did you know the name of my guardian? How did he know? Wasn't it because I had cleared them 10,000 times when I was playing the game? 10,000 times. Back then I was shameless enough to have my members set their alarm clocks and open 4 Smurf accounts in Grey Valley, Twilight Forest, Feralas and the Hinterlands, waiting for these 4 green dragon bosses to appear. Duque rubbed his eyebrows. As expected, there had been a large deviation in the history of this world. Normally, before Ankh-Karaj opened the door, these 4 green dragons that were originally the guardians of the Emerald Dream should have been corrupted by the power of darkness and fallen into madness. But now for some reason there was no news of them at all. Although the shameless Duque had forgotten about these second-rate green dragons, he didn't mind spoiling it. Isra, actually, when I returned from the ancient war 10,000 years ago, I peeked into many scenes of the future. One of them was before An-Karaj opened the door. Your 4 guardians were corrupted by the power of the army and the king of nightmares. Isra's face instantly became transparent. This wasn't an exaggeration. She had really moved her soul and body to another dimension. Alexstrasza panicked. Why didn't you say so earlier? Duque looked like he was in pain. Anyone who casually reveals the pulse of fate will suffer the backlash of fate. Many powers in the world were equivalent. Although the dragon aspects which were created by the Titans were very powerful, their power actually came from the planet of Azeroth itself. As a reward for protecting the planet and abiding by their oath, they had that basically unnatural ability and could replenish their energy from the planet. Duque's words really made Alexstrasza speechless. In a sense, Duque couldn't spoil it directly, but he could prepare in advance. This was already very good to everyone. The Emerald Dream was very huge. When not in battle, the dragons were more solitary in nature and had a habit of sleeping. This meant that Isra and the other green dragons were more like a queen and a vassal. They wouldn't interact unless there was something important. Not seeing each other for decades or even centuries was not a big deal. If Duque didn't mention it, Isra wouldn't even think of looking at her subordinates. After a few seconds, the human form of Isra became solid again. Thank you. Something really happened to those guys. Isra's expression was solemn. How is it? Is it serious? Alexstrasza was very nervous. It's quite serious. Fortunately, it doesn't seem to be beyond repair. Isra lightly bowed to Duque like a lady. I'm sorry. Although I wanted to talk more with you, it seems that I have to leave now. Go ahead. Duque nodded. Leave the void battlefield to us. Her big sister patted her chest. If I'm not here. Isra was a little hesitant. What? Don't we still have 4 guardian dragons? Alexstrasza directly grabbed Xianxia, who was trying to retreat, like an eagle grabbing a chick. Mistress, I've bled for you, I've blocked a knife for you, I've been your mount, you can't ignore me like this. Xianxia's plaintive voice was truly frightening and could make anyone who heard it cry. If one didn't know the reason, they would really think that Duque was some scumbag who played with a girl's body and mind and then heartlessly abandoned her. Damn it. I'm asking you to be a guardian dragon for a while, not to die. Duque flew up without hesitation and kicked Xianxia away. Yo, little female dragon, I think you still need to be taught a lesson. In the Pentashade dragon tribe, no one dares to ignore me. That wasn't a request just now, it was an order. No. Chapter 1364. My dear Xianxia, although I would like to play dragon taming with you when I have time, I cannot disobey the king's orders. Have a safe journey, dear. Duque heartlessly waved goodbye, which made Xianxia break down. She asked directly through the soul connection. That tearful voice would break even the most cold-hearted person's heart. Master, my dear master, are you really so heartless? After I became your mount, I have never rebelled. I have always done my best to complete the tasks you give me. For so long, even if I don't have any merits, I have worked hard. Are you really willing to let me go to that damned place with no gold, no treasure, and nothing but broken stones and endless demons? Am I just a thug and a plaything that you can throw away when you are tired of playing with me? As Xianxia struggled, she revealed the Dragon's Valley, intentionally or unintentionally. Duque swallowed his saliva and said slowly through the soul connection, when you come back, you will see a dragon bed made of pure gold and karazhan, specially made for you to sleep on. When Xianxia heard this, her eyes suddenly turned into 2 shiny gold coins. Really? You are not lying to me? I don't want a human-sized toy. I want one that I can sleep on in my dragon form. This is your master's promise, Duque said heroically. Xianxia bit her red lips. All right, if you really do it after I come back, I am willing to add one more item to the dragon taming list. You can decide the specifics. It's a deal. Deal. Alexstrasza naturally had no way of knowing the soul communication between this master and servant, nor did she know what kind of dirty deal they had reached. She only knew that this evil little female dragon who had no interest in guarding the dragon sleep temple, suddenly glowed, gave up struggling and was willing to work for her. Well, no matter what, this was a good thing. She glanced at Duque and Duque gave her an okay gesture. Blinking, the Red Dragon Queen was still a little worried. You didn't pay a terrible price, did you? No, no, no. Onyxia is my most loyal mount. A little reward is only right. Besides, it won't hinder me in any way. Good. Alexstrasza would never know how shameless a transmigrator could be. Golden Dragon Bed? Duque wouldn't go out of his way to do something so valiant and arrogant. But Duque was going to open a bank. That's right. After Duque had devoted himself to farming for 22 years, the resources of the Alliance had reached an extremely abundant level. As a result, there were more and more economic problems, the biggest of which was currency transactions. In the past, even before the formation of the Alliance, every country used the Arajuo gold coin as a unified currency. Gold characters were very expensive. Everyone agreed that they were very valuable. Seemed to be all right. In the past, buying a top-notch warhorse would only cost a few gold coins. Now that the Alliance was playing with high technology when large-scale military products like steam tanks came out, the cost could easily be thousands of gold coins, or even tens of thousands or millions of gold coins. With such a shocking cost, using gold coins to trade was simply asking for death. The Alliance had already begun to use gold notes to replace gold coins, but the merchants didn't approve of it. Duque had already decided to issue paper money. To give paper money value, apart from the best security measures, there had to be enough collateral. As a transmigrator, the easiest thing to think of was a gold standard with gold as the core. In the early American economic system before transmigration, paper money could be issued with as much gold as there was gold. Therefore, the key to issuing paper money was that there had to be enough gold in the Alliance. This gold couldn't be touched. Before Onyxia returned, Duque would specially send people to guard it. When she returned, so what if it became a bed for her to sleep on? He could even say that the Alliance had specially found a demigod dragon to guard the gold. Duque wasn't worried at all that Onyxia would be corrupted. Giant dragons all had serious hoarding habits. They would hide all the valuable treasures in their lair and not give them to anyone. Otherwise, why would so many brave warriors slay dragons since ancient times? It was very simple. To get rich. The gold bars were all collateral anyway, and Duque wouldn't take them out for cash. It didn't matter at all. Moreover, from the beginning to the end, Duque had never once said, "I will give you all the gold." As for the security and exchange of paper money, that was even simpler. As a demigod of the weave, Duque himself had the most profound magic in the world. He could design a barcode on the paper money. As long as a simple money detector was placed in a place where the weave could reach, it would immediately be able to identify the authenticity of any paper money. If anyone dared to counterfeit it, the weave would immediately send them back. Duque definitely wouldn't mind his elemental emissaries suddenly jumping out from the weave to teach those counterfeiters a lesson. In Duque's mind, as long as he had enough elemental emissaries, he would definitely be able to deal with these situations. Yes. His plan worked. After sending off the 4 dragon aspects, Tyrant walked over and whispered, "Goddess Elun asked me to tell you that when you're done, you can go to the Moon Goddess Shrine as a guest. But this matter isn't urgent." Yes. The gods' business was with the gods and the mortals' business was with the mortals. After sending off those high-ranking guys, Thrall could finally come over. He brought Wajin, Magni and William over. "Are you satisfied with the loot this time?" Duque asked Thrall with a smile. Sar grinned, revealing his long fangs. Phew, I finally don't have to listen to those guys complaining about how the Alliance heroes have better equipment than the Horde heroes. A heaven-defying victory, coupled with the generous spoils of war, could resolve many conflicts without a trace. Even the Sun King Anastrian, who had lost the most manpower, now had the Dark Storm gauntlets, the Cloak of Clarity, and the Ancient God's Embrace on his waist. These pieces of equipment produced by Fun that the powerhouses of the Alliance looked down upon were now nothing to him. The Sun King wouldn't show any dissatisfaction with Thrall at this time. Magni said, "When you were busy just now, Thrall and Wajin proposed to us that they hoped the Horde and the Alliance would sign a closer cooperation agreement. If possible, it would be better to sign it in the form of an alliance." After Magni finished speaking, Thrall and Wajin's uneasy expression said everything. At this time, the strength of the Alliance and the Horde was not equal. To some extent, This was an alliance request that was not based on strength but purely based on feelings. A majestic lion would never try to make an antelope its ally. No leader in their right mind would have agreed to it under such circumstances. Unexpectedly, Duke nodded. It's not a big problem. As for the specific details, let the people below discuss it. Chapter 1365. With regards to Duque's straightforward agreement, not only did the Horde feel incredulous, but even William felt that it was a little too easy for the Horde. William would never forget how his father had died. He hadn't died during the terrifying evacuation of Stormwind City, nor had he died in the cruel second battle of the Dark Portal. In fact, he had fought on the front lines time and time again without suffering any injuries. Yet he had died in an assassination attempt by the orcs. As someone who had experienced the first and second battle of the Dark Portal, Duque should have hated the orcs the most. Why had Duque agreed? Was it too hasty? Or was it purely emotional? William didn't speak. He was a king and a strong man. However, when placed in the entire alliance, he was lacking in terms of strength, experience, knowledge, and judgment. Unlike the William in history who had to stand up and carry the flag, the current William still had Duque to protect him from the wind and rain. Perhaps his growth would be slower, but compared to the short-tempered and violent William who had been dominated by the ghost wolf for a long time, he would make fewer mistakes and grow more steadily. Suddenly, William remembered what Bolvar for Dragon had said. As the regent left behind by the previous king, William worshipped Anduin Lothar the most, and accepted all of Anduin's opinions unconditionally. After Anduin's death, Duque had disappeared time and time again. The first time it had been 10 years and the second time it had been 4 years. During the period when William was growing up, Duque was basically a name that only existed in legends. Hence, the elder that William trusted the most was Bolvar. Bolvar's evaluation of Duque was as follows. Apart from those who can't be shown in public, there are only 2 kinds of commanders in the world. One is the one who uses all the resources at hand to achieve victory, and the other is the one who obtains all the resources needed to achieve victory before the battle begins. The so-called battle is just a formality. Obviously, Duque is the latter. Bolvar's evaluation had always been deeply imprinted in William's mind. Listen more. Do more. He could ask, but he could not make things difficult for Duque. Because when Duque does things, there's always something that ordinary people like us can't understand. And every time he'll prove that he's right. This was Bolvar's most important advice. Hence, William stood at the side and listened quietly like an obedient junior. Duque's promise made Sal and Wajin overjoyed. Thank you, Duke Marcus. Although I can't say that a human is the best friend of an orc, I have to say that you are the most trustworthy human in the tribe. Sal extended his hand and firmly shook Duque's. Duque sighed. This is all because of Azeroth. Moreover, no one in Azeroth knows what kind of enemy we are going to face next. I can only say that in the coming days, no one can relax their combat readiness. The Burning Legion still had the terrifying commander, Kill, Jaden. Of the several evil ancient gods, only Thun came out. As a leader, I must prepare for the worst. Then your most pessimistic view is? Duque gritted his teeth. These guys mentioned above will all come out to cause trouble in the next 10 years. Sal and Wajin's expressions turned cold at the same time. If what Duque said was right, then the Alliance indeed had no reason to launch a war against the Horde. Fighting among themselves in front of a great enemy was really courting death. I understand. I will prepare the combat readiness plan and arrange it. On the other side, Kane also ran over, exchanged a few pleasantries and took Sal away. As the victors, the Horde warriors were also eager to see their leader and hear his victory declaration. As for the spoils of war, there was not much trouble. Basically, it was settled after a few words of discussion. When all the tribes had left and only the Alliance was left, William finally asked the question in his heart. Uncle Duke, will those terrible things really happen? Phew. Duque exhaled, then handed a note to William. It's not a question of whether or not it will happen. It has already happened. After quickly reading the translated coded letter, William's eyes suddenly shrank. No wonder. No wonder when you finished fighting Hacker and wanted to pull the troops over to Kalimdor, I stopped you in Stormwind City on the grounds of insufficient transport capacity. Duque smiled. In this battle of Silithus, The soldiers sent by the alliance were mainly dwarves and gnomes, and they forcefully bombarded the battlefield. There were not many infantry soldiers and they were basically second-tier legions. None of the famous Scarlet Cross Legion or Griffin Legion came. Anyway, on the alliance's side, there were orcs and taurens on foot, trolls and night elves on long range, and the forgotten mages on the mages' side. It was completely enough. In the face of a great enemy, no one played any tricks. The result was naturally a happy one. Who would have thought that Duque had already secretly detained the main force, ready to send them all to the dark portal at any time? Everything was based on one name, Draenor. It was also commonly known as the Outland. Now the situation there had already undergone major changes. After Illidan's storm rage was defeated by Arthas, who had yet to become a Lich King, he ran to the Outland to cause trouble, just like in history. However, in this life he did not have Kael, that's as an accomplice. There was no Kai Zi, who was now officially appointed by the Alliance as the leader of the Outland Dispatch Army. As an upright high elf prince, after washing away his shame in the Battle of Mount Hyjal, he was once again revered as a hero by the elves, and Queen Sylvanas did not stop her people from seeking refuge with Kael. That's the biggest difference from the original history was that Kai Zi should have led the Blood Elves to beat the bitter Draenei like dogs, and even occupied their old nest in Draenor, the Storm. Now history had changed drastically. Kai Zi seemed to be guided by fate and ran to the Storm again. However, this time the Draenei were almost wiped out by the fell orc army, and they had nowhere to go, so they sent a request for help. Kai Zi's sense of justice was overflowing and he brought his elves to help. This made Duque, who was familiar with history, feel very amused. "Are we going to war again?" Magni asked calmly. "Oh, not so fast. I plan to give some support and then let Kael, that's hold on for a while longer." "That's good. The Alliance's morale is still okay, but the soldiers' physical strength and the country's financial resources are at their limits." Magni sighed. Without Duque's economic development plan, the Alliance would probably be even more miserable. Chapter 1366. It was fine to fight the war to defend the country. That was a war where even if they lost their pants they wouldn't even frown. But suddenly, in order to kill evil, they had to travel across the galaxy and send a larger army to another world. It was conceivable that this would cause widespread debate within the Alliance. Now that Duque said that they needed to slow down, it would undoubtedly make the people below heave a sigh of relief. Duque turned to William. "You just wanted to ask me why I want to form an alliance with the Horde, right?" "Yes, that's right. May I ask whose territory is Draenor?" Everyone heard this and immediately understood. Even after the terrifying explosion, according to the intelligence, there were still many orcs living on the shattered Draenor planet. Duque continued, "If the Horde is just this one in Azeroth, even if the orcs, taurens, trolls, goblins and the Forsaken are united, how many people can they have? 200,000 at most. Not to mention 200,000 even if the Horde had a population of 1 million, I wouldn't care. But it's different in Draenor." Queen Sylvie, who had just been playing with the spoils of war, strode over. "How many Horde are there in Draenor?" "Adult warriors no less than 3 million. Now the latest intelligence is that Illidan is acting as the Burning Legion's pawn, working with the Lord of the Abyss, Magtheridon, in an attempt to turn all orcs into fell orcs. This means that if Illidan succeeds, we will have to face 10 million strengthened orcs." After saying this, Duque added, "At least." This time the whole audience gasped. Duke continued to ask, "Are there people who are thinking, at least we still control the dark portal?" Kalia shook her head. "Just like how we chose to destroy Karaj's worm nest to prevent it from giving birth to more worms to harm the world. This time we will not let those who tried to destroy Azeroth go. Relying on defense alone would never be reliable. Passive defense was the choice of the weak. The real defense line was never those fortresses built on the pass, but a stronger army." Phew, Duque let out a long sigh of relief. It was great to have Tyreenas out of the way. The entire alliance was under his control, and he didn't have to worry about anyone holding him back. At this time he said slowly, "That's why I agreed to form an alliance with the Horde. My biggest hope is to let Sar re-establish contact with the orcs of Draenor and let him organize the orcs to fight against Illidan's army." "Could it be?" Duque knew that Magni wanted to ask if he would release the tiger back into the mountains. Duque shook his head. According to history, Sar would have returned to Nagrand in the Outland and become a disciple of a master, stepping onto the path of nature and changing from a simple warrior to a true shaman. This Sao would be a more selfless and harmless leader. The beastmen aren't the only powers in the outer realms. I have ordered Kale that's to deal with the race that calls itself the Drenii. If possible, I hope to absorb the Drenii into the alliance because these Drenii believe in the path of the holy light just like us. At this point, Duque lightly hammered Theon's breastplate with his fist. Among the many races in Azeroth, the dwarves, gnomes and elves mostly formed an alliance with the humans because of benefits. The Drenii, on the other hand, joined the alliance because of their religion and ideals. In Duque's eyes, the Drenii joining the alliance was a matter of course. Moreover, the leader of the Drenii was Valen. The respectable Valen was also known as the Immortal. He had witnessed the destruction of countless worlds by the hands of the Burning Legion, and was one of the few people who could remember all of these worlds. Valen's origins were unknown, but in his hometown Argus he was once a respectable leader. 25,000 years ago the Dark Titan Sardras had promised the people of Velan infinite power, but he had wisely rejected it. He foresaw that accepting this power would bring endless disasters. However, the other two leaders of Eridar, Kil'jaeden and Archimonde, agreed to Sardras's deal. Valen realized that he no longer had a place in Argus. He and his brave followers rebelled against the Dark Titan, and with the help of the mysterious holy light creature Naru escaped Argus. These brave exiles began to call themselves the Drenii or the Exiles. Who knew that Kil'jaeden, who had surrendered to Sardras, had been organizing a demon army in the past 25,000 years, not letting these Drenii go. Valen fought with the demon army for thousands of years, until he led his people to the world where the barbaric beastmen lived. This became the refuge of this group of wanderers. They named this new world Draenor. By the way, the beastmen didn't recognize the name Draenor. Basically, they would only call their homeland our world. Valen and his people lived a relatively peaceful and stable life in Draenor for hundreds of years. Although they knew that it was only a matter of time before the Burning Legion found them, they still worked very hard to coexist peacefully with the other races here. Unfortunately, because a troublesome shaman named Nizul discovered Kil'jaeden's will in the void, he was tricked, and so there were all kinds of conflicts between the beastmen and the Drenii. Under Nizul's tricking, the various beastmen clans gathered together, formed the old tribes, and directly broke through the largest settlement of the Drenii in Draenor, the holy city Shotrath. The miserable Drenii had no fixed residence for a time, and were forced to Zangarmarsh. Many Drenii even lost their minds and became like wandering ghosts, wandering in the swamp. Now Duque was very sure that Valen, the ancient prophet, was very clear that the Drenii would face a new threat. The Immortal had to protect his people, otherwise the entire Drenii race would be swallowed by darkness. And the appearance of the alliance just happened to be the biggest opportunity for the Drenii to survive and multiply. Kale that sent a letter saying that the leader of the Drenii Valen wishes to meet me, Duque said. Are you going? Jaina asked. Yes, of course I'm going, but not now. The alliance needs rest and time. At this point, Duque patted William's shoulder. William, go on my behalf and reach a preliminary agreement with Valen, okay? I still have to busy myself with the magic net. Hey, Uncle Duque. A sharp light flashed in William's eyes. He knew that this was a rare opportunity to sharpen himself and prove himself. After a simple discussion, Duque first returned to Naxxramas, and then he summoned the twin emperors. With a smack he threw Thun's tentacle on the ground. You two, is there anything else you're hesitating about? Chapter 1367. Thun's Tentacle. This was an item that was deeply loved by gentlemen. If it was in the game, this accessory could summon Thun's tentacle to whip the player's enemies. Just like Barev's butler Bell, it could summon 3 thugs in an instant to obstruct traffic and affect the city's appearance. Wrong, it was to disturb the enemy. If Duque couldn't manipulate the elements and make them into whips or tentacles or something, he might use them to tame dragons someday. Of course, at this moment this was just a proof. The twin emperors were very arrogant. In the past, their noses were almost pointing to the sky. However, when Duque showed this tentacle that had lost its owner but not its life, their dead-like faces changed several times. This was the end of an era. As servants, of course they could sense that Thun was done for. It was just that without seeing it with their own eyes they still couldn't believe it. This was a fact. The era of the ancient gods is over. In the future maybe Yogg-Saron will jump out and so will Asha. Well, forget about that despicable villain Enzoth. But so what? If I can kill an ancient god I can naturally kill the second, the third. Duque's words were like a hammer, hammering hard on the twin emperors' hearts, smashing their last reservations into powder. Simply forcing them to surrender was very simple. But kings and emperors were not the same thing. Since ancient times there had been kings who occupied land, but there had never been emperors who occupied land. Simply forcing them to surrender, it was hard to guarantee that they wouldn't rebel in the future or be a little lazy. That's right, Duque could indeed control whether their souls were annihilated or not, but he couldn't control their hearts, ambitions. Only the most thunderous suppression, even calculating the future, could subdue these two incomparably arrogant insect emperors. Moreover, in Duque's next plan, the twin emperors also played an extremely important role. As twin brothers, Emperor Vec-Lar and Emperor Vec-Lar were naturally connected. Yes, they were already dead. In their spiritual state they could be said to have no desires. But they still had to find a way out for their own people. In this battle the Karaji insect people could be said to have suffered heavy losses. The destruction of several large insect nests as well as the fall of the Kiraj Holy Temple was almost a disaster for the Kiraj insect people. If they wanted to struggle at death's door and for their race to continue, they had to find a way out. Otherwise, with the size of the insect race, it would not be a dream for them to be wiped out. Especially after Duque showed them the scene of him contacting the Azeroth Star Soul and destroying Thun's body and divine power organization with lava, they were even more clear that the insect race's greatest support was gone. In front of Duque, the twin emperors who were once incomparably arrogant, heavily bent their knees in a uniform movement that was difficult for others to imitate, bending the spine that had only been bent in front of Thun. Vecnalis, greets my lord. At this very moment, the twin emperors were broadcasting to the entire Karaj insect race through the insect race's unique mental network. With this kneel, the new master and servant names had been determined. From this moment on, there were no more Karaj insect people as Thun's servants. There were only Kiraj insect people as servants of Duke Marcus. In the eyes of humans and other races, becoming a servant was an absolutely unacceptable thing. In the eyes of the insect swarm, this was a kind of inevitability. Under the leadership of the strongest god in the realm of gods, even if they were servants, it was a kind of glory. For a moment, almost all the insect warriors who were still alive suddenly let out sharp cries. In every cave of Silithus, in the areas of Karaj that had not yet been cleared, the unique sharp cries of the insect swarm echoed everywhere. This scene frightened the Alliance and Horde warriors who had already entered a state of celebration. Many people almost wet their pants and threw down the large wine glasses in their hands, looking around for their weapons in a drunken state. The next moment, Duque's voice was broadcast in all places connected to the magic net. I am Duke Marcus, and the Kiraj insect people are now swearing allegiance to me. This is not an enemy attack. I repeat, this is not an enemy attack. This message was quickly translated into various language versions: Darnassus, Dwarven, Gnome, Orc. The air was suddenly silent and immediately in every corner of Silithus, there was an even louder cheer. Haha. I knew it. Bullshit. You were the first one to wet your pants. Did you see that your pants are wet? Don't talk nonsense. That's the wine I spilled. Don't talk nonsense. Let's drink to our invincible commander Sir Duke Marcus. Cheers. The group of heartless guys once again drank to their heart's content. Only the higher-ups of the Horde looked very interesting. Sal and Wajin looked at each other and saw each other's bitterness. The gap between the Alliance and the Horde had widened again. This time it could be said that both continents were suffering at the same time. The Alliance first had Ragnaros the Balrog and Nefarian the demigod dragon causing chaos, then Naxxramas spreading natural disasters back and forth, and finally the two troll clans, kingdoms, of Zwaman and Zul, Gurub. The horde was only attacked by the swarm. The successive disasters of the Eastern Kingdom continent were all extinguished without mishap. Although the losses on the battlefield were not small and many villages and towns were destroyed, it was far from the point of serious damage. The development of the horde, on the other hand, had suffered a devastating blow. All the new colonies were destroyed and the major cities were hit hard and almost fell. After fighting a battle, it was still a victory. In terms of economy and population, the horde was suffering a huge loss. Even if it wasn't a huge gain, they would at least be able to fight to a draw with the floating fortress and the entire insectoid alliance. In addition, the horde now had Duke, a living, unremarkable demigod, as the boss. This gap was so desperate that they could only look up to him. At this time, Grom stood up. "Great Chief, I have an idea." At the same time, in Naxxramas, Duque gently lifted the twin emperors with the hand of magic. "Since you have chosen to be loyal to me, I am not an ungrateful guy. These two things can be considered a greeting gift to you." First, Duque gently put on the newly received ring on Vecnala's the Great's hand. Originally, this ring should have been called Ring of the Ancient Gods, symbolizing the power and glory of Si Thun. Now, the name on that ring was forcibly crossed out by Duque with high-intensity divine power, and a new name was written next to it in the common language, Ring of the Godslayer. Then what was given to Vecnala's the Great was Argus Apostle. As the saying goes, the Emperor's mind. The twin emperors were such smart guys, how could they not think that Duque was warning them not to have any unnecessary thoughts? Chapter 1368. Your boss, Si Thun, was pretty awesome, wasn't he? Sorry. He was killed with one slap. It didn't matter who did it, he was now a dregs. The Burning Legion seemed to have destroyed countless stars. They were invincible in the universe, right? Hehe. His boss was stabbed to death by me and his subordinate Archimond was also stabbed to death by me. With these two things, at least there was no need to worry about them daring to jump ship to the Burning Legion or other ancient gods. Thank you, my lord. Although they understood, the twin emperors accepted it. For a defeated person, this was already the best outcome. Didn't you know that during the Dark Empire, the defeated people were all eaten? There were other reasons for Duque's benevolence towards the twin emperors. He had single-handedly promoted 6 elemental emissaries, and the performance of the 6 of them was as Duque had expected, completing the duty of extracting magic from the elemental realm to fill the magic net for Duque. From a pharaoh's point of view, they were absolutely competent and qualified. However, after the magic net was established, Duque inevitably had greater ambitions. Ordinary swords were meaningless to demons that were easily over 5 meters tall. The only 2 paths that could improve the combat power of mortals were magic and technology. In terms of technology, Duque had already continuously stuffed all kinds of things that could be called black technology into the alliance. The speed of advancement seemed to be the limit at the moment. 2 legs were better than 1. If the magic net could be upgraded and strengthened, the alliance could have the maximum number of mages when the Burning Legion officially broke into Azeroth in the future. From the establishment of the magic net to the trial run, Duque immediately discovered a tragic problem. He was too busy. Mechanical replies could not actually meet the needs of the customers, or the needs of these little mages who would become Duque's dedicated thugs in the future. Pharaoh was a guy with a particularly big brain no matter where he was in the world. If he did not want to be tested for countless loopholes and abuse of the magic net, he had to invest enough intelligent managers. Otherwise, it was very likely that the tragedy of artificial intelligence being played as a human worker before Duque's transmigration would occur. As elemental emissaries, Saffron and Thaddeus were undoubtedly qualified. However, these 2 guys were more brawn than brains when they were alive. It would be too difficult for them to be managers. Alonso's was also a person who was good at preaching but not very good at managing. In reality, it was basically Khadgar who was struggling, while Majordomo and Black Witch Farina helped out. One of the 2 guys behind her was a fire demon, and his way of doing things was rough. The other one was never at ease with her. If Karthika wasn't a spiritual body, he might have died from overwork. Now Duque could finally add a powerful ally to his weave, the demon emperor Veclor. As a mage emperor, he was one of the few demigods who was proficient in multiple types of magic. In addition, he had been a queen Zerg for the past few thousand years. The Bug Swarm's thought network had always been one of the multi-threaded manipulation abilities that human mages dreamed of. In fact, on Earth in another world before the development of electronic computers, no one had been able to control hundreds of different objects to do different things at the same time. Being able to do 2 things at once was already considered a genius, but being able to do 100 things at once, he. However, Vec-Lore could do things that were unimaginable in the eyes of humans, but to him, it was as common as eating and drinking. What truly limited his strength was the amount of elemental energy he could extract in a unit of time, as well as the problem of elemental conflict, and not the ability to cast multiple spells. After Duque connected Vec-Lore's soul to the weave and gave him authority that was second only to Khadgar, who had been so busy that he almost went crazy, was scared out of his wits. Casually connecting to a mental connection and listening to the conversation between Vec-Lore and the mage connected to the weave, Khadgar realized that he still had a lot to learn. I am the new weave administrator, Vec-Lore. Please speak. I am Peter Johnson. I would like to ask if there is a powerful fire spell that can blow up a mountain in one move? There is, but you can't use it. If you bring up such unrealistic topics again, I will ban you from connecting. Then when can I have all the metamagic abilities? Vec-Lore's divine will reached out of the weave and scanned the fellow. Not in this lifetime. What kind of attitude is this? Don't you know that I am a famous archmage? This self-proclaimed noble fellow was furious. Scram. He immediately cut off the connection to the weave and even used his administrator authority to block that fellow's access. Not only that, he had also secretly added him to the blacklist. If that fellow joined the Calamity Army or something like that, he would directly use magic from the weave to destroy him. Vec-Lore also had a bad temper. Although he was used to commanding the entire swarm with his mind, that did not mean that he had to be as polite as the customer service staff that a certain transmigrator had met in the past. Even if he met an idiot, he would still have to coax them. In Khadgar's eyes, this was definitely going overboard. He wanted to say something, but Duque had already shouted from the side, "Well done." What else could he say when his boss was like this? Previously, when the weave had just been established, Khadgar had still patiently dealt with these people who were too weak and had a bad temper. Now that Duque had the time to set the rules, he could finally relax. The weave seems to be neutral, but it is actually a magic system used by the Alliance's military. There is no need to take advantage of those people who have too much self-awareness. Later on, set a stricter rule. I understand. Khadgar nodded and bowed. With Vec-Lore, Khadgar could become a higher-level prosecutor and supervise Vec-Lore. Duke had already made plans to defeat even more magic users in the future and capture their souls to fill up the weave working for him. After Duque had beaten the twin emperors with a stick, he should have given them a carrot. Unfortunately, the twin emperors were not ordinary people. Ordinary small favors were meaningless to them. The only thing that could increase their sense of identity was the reproduction and elevation of the entire Kiraj insect race. This was not something that could be achieved overnight. Fortunately, there was such an opportunity at this moment. William had also returned to Naxxramas. In the command center, he returned to the command room almost immediately after attending the victory banquet, as though he was just going through the motions. He was looking at the intelligence on the outland. Falila walked over. You just won a big victory. Don't you want to take a rest first? William rubbed his eyebrows. The gods should be the gods, the mortals should be the mortals. I didn't understand this sentence before, but now I have a deeper understanding of it. Uncle Duque needs to focus his energy on more important things. He needs to focus on dealing with stronger enemies. As a junior and also as a king, I should do my best to help. Brawl Bearskin, who was at the side, was about to say something, but saw Valila shake her head. Chapter 1369. Varian had a good father. He was born noble, and there were so many legendary figures around him to take care of him. This was both a blessing and a curse. That was because, under the halo of those legendary figures, everything he did seemed to pale in comparison. Killing the evil god Hacker. Even if Hacker was the weakest existence in the divine realm, Hacker was still a god. If this was the previous 2,800 years of peace, this feat could be boasted for dozens of lifetimes, and it would be sung by countless bards for thousands of generations. Unfortunately, Varian's achievements were completely overshadowed by Duque. That was because Ragnaros's clone, the demigod dragon Nefarian, the demigod lich Cal Thazad, and the real ancient evil god Sithun were also killed at the same time. This was a shared glory, but it was also the sorrow of being in the same era as other great people. Because in the history books only the strongest person in the alliance, Duke Marcus, would be recorded as leading a group of strong people to complete this great kill. Perhaps historians and the upper nobles would remember the names of every participant, but it was a pity that ordinary people would only remember the first few names. Duque Thrall Magni. If he was a mediocre person, he might be depressed under such a blow and be mediocre for the rest of his life. Varian wasn't. He was eager to prove himself. He was eager but not extreme. Fortunately, in terms of seniority, Duque was a generation older than him. Duque didn't directly set any rules and regulations for him, and didn't force him to do any work or training that he was unwilling to do. Otherwise, in his youth, it was very likely that he would become distorted and degenerate like Arthas. At this moment, Varian's eyes were filled with enthusiasm for work. Brawl, I need the known maps of the Outland as well as the reports of all the general levels that were sent to the Outland. Varian thought that he would get a colored map, but he didn't expect Brawl to bring the great astrologer Solarian. Solarian came over and opened her hands. Suddenly, a three-dimensional map appeared in midair. Her slender fingers, which were unique to elves, flew nimbly, marking the three-dimensional map with different colors. Solarian's clear voice spoke. The Outland used to be the planet Draenor. 17 years ago, Master Marcus threw the third-generation great chieftain Nazul out of Karazhan in a state of self-destruction. At the same time, it caused a big explosion because the core of the explosion was located in Draenor. The result is that Draenor is in tatters. Right now, the Outland is divided into 7 regions. Hellfire Peninsula in the east, Netherstorm in the northeast, Blade Peak in the northwest, Sangermarsh in the west, Nagrand in the southwest, Taroka Forest in the south and Moon Shadow Valley in the southeast where Illidan's main force is located. The Door of Darkness is currently in a very stable state. The door in the direction of Draenor is located at the easternmost side of the Hellfire Peninsula. The first group of expeditionary forces that were sent out back then had established a sturdy outpost on the eastern side of the Hellfire Peninsula. Recently, Master Marcus upgraded it to a firmer level 1 castle, Glory Castle, with Sir Daneth Trollbane as the supreme commander. Here, Solarian pointed, and the three-dimensional image of the Netherstorm in the northeast suddenly protruded. Prince Kael, that's is leading the Blood Elves to support the Draenei in defending the Storm Fortress. According to the intelligence, because they activated a huge robot guard, ethereal mech, that is more than 10 stories tall, they were able to withstand the siege of tens of thousands of fell orcs with a small number of troops. At this point, Solarian stopped. Is there anything you want to ask? William frowned. In 7 years, the Alliance has only expanded their control area in the Outland. Supplies are very difficult. On the Hellfire Peninsula, almost no grass grows. On the vast reddish-brown plains, there are mutated creatures everywhere. In areas without the protection of the Holy Light Magic Circle, the advanced troops don't even dare to casually drink unfiltered water. Fortunately, when we went there, we brought enough supplies for 30,000 people to use for 2 years. Relying on measures such as limiting supplies, we managed to survive the period when we lost contact. Solarian then pointed to the middle of the Hellfire Peninsula. There is the Fell Orc Fortress, Hellfire Fortress, here which has lost its mind after being contaminated by evil energy. According to incomplete statistics, there are more than 200,000 Fell Orcs gathered here, and their real leader is the Burning Legion's Abyssal Lord Mactherodon. Not only him, there is also a humanoid giant mechanical creation, Fell Mech, on the plains that is difficult for our current civilization to understand. According to calculations, it is nearly 20 stories tall. Looking at the appearance and data of the Fell Mech projected by Solarian, William's brows furrowed even tighter, forming a narrow Chuan character. Brawl couldn't help but sigh. Other than the dwarves' cannons, I reckon there is nothing that can kill this thing. William asked, won't this thing attack Glory Castle? It will wander in a fixed area and attack all creatures in its line of sight. This area happens to be between the Dark Portal and Glory Castle, and it brings a lot of trouble to our supplies. Every time we resupply, we will lose at least 60% of our horses. Horses, Solarian emphasized, because there is a lack of water in this place, coupled with the fact that it has been ravaged by the fell mech for a long time, the quality of the soil is very bad. The dwarf steam tanks often get stuck and are unable to move. So we use the most primitive horses for transportation, and because of the lack of necessary water and fodder, the losses to the horses are also huge. William wasn't a king who had never fought a war and could only command blindly. He had been trained in the most orthodox military academy in Stormwind, worked as a slave gladiator, and personally commanded the war against the Troll Empire in Zhou, Europe. William was much stronger than he was at the same time in history. He understood why they couldn't advance after hearing that. In order to defeat a strong enemy, they had to have a strong military force or extraordinary individual combat power. If the Alliance's powerhouses couldn't leave, they could only accumulate military power. Unfortunately, the supplies were terrible and the distance between the Dark Portal and Glory Castle was more than 200 kilometers. William didn't think that the starving soldiers would be able to defeat the ferocious Fel Orc army. Phew. I understand the general situation now. William let out a long breath. When the other kings arrive, I will discuss this matter with them. At this moment, the door suddenly opened and Duque came in with an existence that surprised William. Looking at the other party's pair of cicada wings and 4 sharp claws, William was a little dumbfounded. Uncle Duque, she... This female insect person who exuded the aura of a powerhouse and was wearing a purple long-sleeved shirt, spoke awkwardly in the common language. Sartura. Chapter 1370. Duque waved his hand. William, she's Sartura's sister. Although she's slightly weaker, I can't find a better helper for you. William understood immediately. You're planning to send the Zergs to the Outland? Of course there were humans and Protoss. How could there not be Zergs? Duque almost blurted out this sentence. Sigh. Long before World of Warcraft there was StarCraft first. Cough cough. Speaking of which, when the Draenei wore full body armor, they definitely looked like the Protoss in StarCraft. Not to mention the humans now. Duque had been feeding them advanced technology for more than 20 years. How could the Alliance fight a war now? The infantry flanked, the tanks opened the way and the self-propelled cannons followed and set them on the ground. Fire the cannons and bombard them. It would be perfect if they could really destroy the Burning Legion's interstellar battleship. Although the Alliance also had flying battleships like the Heavenbreaker, the Willow Nail, which was bigger than a human's fist, looked low-class no matter how one looked at it. As for the race, it wasn't so particular. Now there were only 3 Queen Zergs left among the Kiraj insect people. They were all under on Kiraj and had become Duque's servants. As long as there was enough meat, he could continuously create a terrifying Zerg army. In the harsh environment of the Outland, delicate things like warhorses couldn't be used. Zergs were just right and he wouldn't feel any heartache if they died. William was happier to see Sartura than his own queen. He was smart enough to completely understand Duque's intentions. William excitedly gave an Alliance military salute to Duque. Your Excellency, please give me your instructions. Since William wanted to do business, Duque let him be. I have more important things to do in Azeroth. It's about a big conspiracy of the Burning Legion. It's not convenient for me to reveal too much now. Smart people were easy to talk to. William understood with just one look from Duque. The only Burning Legion big boss that could make Duque worry so much was Kill Jaden. Yes. Jaden the trickster. If it was this guy, then it was only natural that Duque would be in charge. Varian nodded to show that he understood. Duque continued, the all-out war in the Outer Realms won't start so soon. The Alliance had just gone through a series of battles. Be it manpower or resources, they were unable to support an all-out war in a short period of time. Illidan is not our only enemy. Therefore I hope that your first step will be to connect with the tribe and open up the road from the Dark Portal to the Glory Fortress. Build 2 railways and build a fortress with 500 people at each end of sight to ensure our supplies. The final goal is to flatten the entire Hellfire Peninsula. William's pupils constricted slightly. Duque's intention was to wipe out the hundreds of thousands of evil beastmen and the Hellfire Fortress, as well as the Abyssal Lord Mactherodon and the Fel Reavers. How many troops can I have? How many troops to commit in the early stage depends on the supplies. Before the expansion of the Dark Portal, including the Advance Guard of Glory Castle, there were less than 50,000 Alliance members and 3,000 mechanized vehicles. And then? If I settle the Hellfire Peninsula, and the Alliance hasn't mobilized yet, what am I going to do? Varian asked. Duque stared into Varian's eyes and saw only determination and confidence. Duque sighed and pointed to the southwest of the Hellfire Peninsula. If you complete your mission perfectly, then on one hand you can consolidate the position. On the other hand you can pass through here. If my information is correct, there is a road called the Thorn Path that leads straight to the Taroko Forest. If you go west from here you can reach Shotrath City. Shotrath City? The main city of the Drenii? Varian frowned. Didn't the information say that it was besieged by the Beastmen more than 20 years ago and turned into ruins? It used to be until a group of Shatrars came. Shatrars meant, born in the holy light. They were a group of Naru people who came to the outer realms to intercept and kill the Burning Legion. The Naru people lived in the ruins of Shotrath City. There was also a small group of surviving Drenii priests who insisted on performing the holy rite in the ruins of the temple in the city. As the news of the arrival of the Shatrars gradually spread, these priests called Aldo quickly regained their lives. The reconstruction of Shotrath City quickly began. If it wasn't for the arrival of another group of invaders, the reconstruction would have been completed very quickly. Here the original history took a beautiful turn. The attack this time was indeed from Illidan Stormrich's troops. However, in history, it was an egg-seeking fool who sent a large group of blood elves to destroy this city. Now it was Gagoma, the inspector from Hell Fortress, who led 10,000 Fel Orcs to surround and annihilate the remnants of Shotrath City. When the Fel Orc army crossed the bridge at the edge of Shotrath City, the Aldo bishops and believers also lined up and swore to defend the Dome of Holy Light. But then, less than a quarter of an hour after the fierce battle began, the Drenii who were in the midst of a fierce battle suddenly welcomed a reinforcement army. When Prince Kael, that's heard that the Drenii were going to kneel, he responded to Willen's request and sent his troops from Glory Keep. As a result, when the Fel Orcs were entangled, this blood elf army directly shot from behind and used a large number of magic to set off a grand fireworks, turning the Fel Orcs into ashes. Just as the Drenii were joyfully welcoming these reinforcements, something unexpected happened. The blood elves knelt on the ground in front of the Drenii. The leader of the army, a blood elf elder named Vorithol, rushed into the Dome of Holy Light and asked the leader of the Naru Adal to meet him. When he saw the Naru, Vorithol knelt down and said, "I have seen your illusion, Naru. Only you can save my people. My followers and I are willing to serve you." Well, someone under Kaisi had jumped ship. Kael, that's in this life, was not the blood elf prince in history who was possessed by the devil. Although Duque had given him full authority to handle the Alliance's diplomacy in the Outland, and even had the right to declare war on the Drenii, or to take back these traitors, Kaisi said, "If believing in the holy light can reduce their demon addiction, then I will respect their choice." That's right. The vanguard army came to the Outland and did not receive the nourishment of the Sunwell for many years. The demon addiction once again broke out among Kael, that's subordinates. Although it was not fatal, it seriously affected the combat power of this blood elf army. In the end, this line of blood elves joined the forces of Shotrath City and called themselves astrologers. William rubbed his eyebrows. The forces of the Outland are really complicated. Are you afraid? Duque smiled. A little. William said honestly. Very good. Only by facing the fear in your heart will you truly grow. Go ahead and do it. Even if you blow up the Outland again, I have a way to help you make up for it. William smiled. Chapter 1371. Hey, I wasn't the one who blew up Draenor for the first time. William laughed like a child. The smile on Duque's face was equally amusing. It was Kill Jaden who threw Nizul into my mage tower like a bomb. I merely threw Nizul back. How can you blame me for blowing up Draenor? Yes. It's Kill Jaden's fault. William smiled faintly and came over to give Duque a bear hug. Duke's body wasn't considered thin and weak. But it was a pity that William had inherited his father's genes and had grown tall and strong. Wearing thick plate armor and a large pauldron, he looked almost twice the size of Duque. When they hugged each other, their seniority seemed to be reversed. That was not important. For the first time, William felt the warmth of a family member. Growing up, he was not unfamiliar with Duque, but he was not familiar with him either. During his growth, Duque spent too little time with him. Moreover, the direction of development was not right. He was closer to Duque, who was a warrior, than to Duque, who was a mage. For the past 20 years, he had never felt like a family member to Duque. Their ages were almost 10 years apart. In theory, they were half a generation apart, but in reality, they were one generation lower. After all, Duque was a fierce person who played along with Lang's father and Lothar. It was a strange feeling. The human heart was the most complicated thing in the world. Once upon a time, William was like a king. He was distressed about how to deal with the huge Marcus family. For a kingdom, it was a typical case of too big to handle. A king was not a king and a subject was not a subject. However, when Duque flirted with all the queens and female leaders in the alliance, and did not proclaim himself as an emperor, William began to understand that Duque's pursuit would not intersect with his own. They were like two parallel lines that would never intersect but were moving in the same direction. After knowing that Duque had become a demigod, this feeling became even clearer. Now, if he had to describe his relationship with Duque, it was more like an extremely close and reliable ally, not the so-called king and duke. William smiled as he patted Duque's back. For Azeroth. Duque was a little dazed, but he still smiled. Yes, for Azeroth. That's right, what if I fight against Illidan? Duque whispered, don't let him kill you and don't kill him. Infernal affairs, Duque said in a voice that only William could hear. Varian shuddered. When Duque returned to the War of the Ancients, he had no intention of hiding it from the higher-ups of the Alliance. Other than the part where he accidentally slept with Tyrande, everyone knew that Duque had gone to the Burning Legion under the alias of Infernal Affairs. If Duque mentioned this name, wouldn't that mean that Illidan was? No wonder Varian had such a big reaction. In fact, would the Eggs generation be like history? Would they be in Chao Camp but their hearts were in Chao Camp? Duque was a little uncertain. Because of Duque's activity in the War of the Ancients, Illidan couldn't even show his face to him. The attention of all the big shots of the Burning Legion, including Kil'jaeden, was attracted by Infernal Affairs. Moreover, after being blown up by the twisting nether, would it cause an egg to make a wrong judgment? After being imprisoned for 10,000 years, would he develop other truly evil thoughts and fall into the path of demons? This was the real Azeroth. Each and every one of them was a living hero, an ambitious and ruthless villain. The human heart was the most difficult to guess. Even Varian had a grudge against Duque for so long, so it was hard for Duque to say what would happen to Illidan. So Duque added to Varian, but the human heart is the most difficult to guess. I can't guarantee that his mind has not fallen because of the long-term use of evil, so you have to judge for yourself. Yes. Varian nodded his head heavily. He couldn't be sure, so he could only classify Illidan as an evil first. After explaining everything that needed to be said, Duque left the command room after leaving the Zergs to Varian. As soon as he walked out and turned a corner, Duque suddenly found Magni in the corner with two secret room guards guarding him. Magni was in the corner, sitting on the floor and drinking from a flat metal bottle. Duque was stunned and then smiled. Are you worried about Varian? I'm good brothers with Anduin and Lang. I watched them grow old and I watched Varian grow up. Magni's words were a little out of the blue. It was exactly because he saw Varian as a symbol of his son. Duque sighed slightly. In the corridor, a breeze blew past, causing Duque's mage cloak to flutter. It's a pity that I missed out on a lot. I couldn't understand you in the past. Because in your dictionary the word loyalty doesn't exist. I'm very curious. Why would a person with no loyalty have such unparalleled courage and a sense of justice? Because I'm a transmigrator. Duque couldn't say this out loud. He could only say, I grew up in a place that didn't belong to the Seven Kingdoms. I just happened to be part of Stormwind. There was no such thing as loyalty if one didn't receive any favors. Was that so? If I have to differentiate, I'm only loyal to my own ideals. Azeroth must not perish. Magni suddenly laughed. He handed the metal bottle in his hand to Duque. On this point you're better than the traditional Daoist priests. Those guys would only come out of their damned laboratories when their toilets were blown up. The Dwarf King's bottle was dirty. It had been used for a long time, but Duque didn't mind it at all. He took a big gulp of it. Faster thief. Is this pure alcohol? Or did some bastard give 100% medical alcohol mixed with water to this bastard Magni? With this purity it could definitely light a fire. What was the concept of alcohol with more than 80% alcohol? Drinking it would make one's whole body feel like it was on fire. Even though Duque had the body of a demigod now, he couldn't withstand it with just his physique alone. In a fit of anger, Duque secretly passed that portion of the alcohol to the flame magic circuit. Damn it, burn it however you like. Even though it was the aftermath of the strong alcohol, Duque still choked to death. Cough cough. Seeing Duque coughing, Magni and the two guards in the secret chamber couldn't stop laughing. Ha ha ha. It was rare to see the commander-in-chief of the Alliance and a demigod of the Weave make a fool of himself. Duke plopped down on the floor and leaned over to Magni. This time he took a small sip of the drink. With the first sip and the mental preparation he felt much better. Don't worry, old friend. Although I've never treated William as a real relative, he's an important part of Azeroth. Be it because of Ando or Lang, I'll nurture him well. Yes. Unknowingly, a human and a dwarf drank too much. Chapter 1372. So dizzy. I want to vomit. I'll vomit if I want to. It's been a long time since I've had this feeling. In a daze, Duque returned to the days when he was still studying. His roommates would drink beer that cost a few yuan a bottle at a barbecue stall, boasting, and if they really couldn't take it anymore, they would go to the internet cafe and sleep on the chairs for the night. In a daze, Duque seemed to hear angry voices, and then he felt as if someone was touching his body. After an unknown amount of time, a gentle light shone into his eyes. Duque woke up. He felt something soft and bouncy on his neck. His face seemed to be pressed by something soft. Duque knew that it was definitely not a pillow. When he opened his eyes, the first thing Duque saw was the beautiful silver-haired Xianxia. The female elf keenly sensed that he had woken up and woke up first. She raised her long eyebrows and blinked her bright eyes. Seeing Duque's slightly stunned expression, Xianxia smiled. She stretched out her long white finger and hooked Duque's nose. I'm sleeping now. There was nothing like the treatment of an emperor. Although his back was pressed against the bed, Duque discovered that his head was actually resting on a pair of fair and supple thighs. There was even a giant cat massaging his face. In Duque's harem, there was no one else but Aurelia who could have such a violent aesthetic of both mass and volume. Duque gently pried open the pair of indescribable things that were blocking his vision, and then he saw Aurelia's perfect and flawless face. I'm really sorry for blocking your vision. The Windrunner's elder sister had a very interesting expression on her face. It was hard to tell whether she was happy or angry. Although she said that, Aurelia just sat there and let him enjoy the treatment of her lap pillow. He turned his head and pressed his ear against Aurelia's smooth and flat waist. Don't say that. This is also my exclusive benefit. As for the shameless Duque, Aurelia no longer had any temper. Do you know what you did last night? In any case, we slayed a god. Something that only happens once in 10,000 years. What's wrong with celebrating a little crazily? Duque rubbed his face against Aurelia like a child. Aurelia was about to say something when she suddenly remembered her first meeting with Duque. At that time Duque was just a kid. Although age had lost its meaning after immortality, Aurelia's jade face was still as red as fire. Bastard, you vomited all over us after you came back, alright? Xianxia complained into Duque's ear. So I can still roll back. Not bad, not bad. Duque replied shamelessly. Humph. Be careful, don't move too much. It'll be bad if you hurt the baby. Bullshit. That thing didn't even have fingernails. It's my seed. Can't I sense it? Let me tell you, absorbing mana is a very slow process. Don't expect your tummies to swell without a year or two. Duque's demigod descendants were extremely special. They had nothing to say when he used the principle of demigods to suppress them. Then why did you still forbid us from participating in the Battle of Sea, Fun? Aurelia was unhappy. Before Duque could speak, Sasha pulled her sister. But it's also a fact that we're carrying Duque's child. Boo-hoo. Aurelia howled dryly. At the end of the day, it was the Windrunner's pride at work. She felt that it was a pity that she couldn't participate in such a battle that only happened once in 10,000 years. But before the battle, who could guarantee that a group of demigods could really defeat a true god? Even if it was a weak true god who had forcefully broken free from a sealed state. If they were not careful, she and Sasha would become pregnant with Duque's posthumous child. You sent William to the Outland. What have you been doing all this time? Sasha asked. Vacation. Duque said grandly. Didn't you say that the Burning Legion? Duque rolled his eyes. How can it be that fast? Besides, I have an absolutely reliable source of information. Yes, right after he defeated Si Thun, Duque received the first news from the Gemini in Karazhan. Sadly, they had been pushed to the bottom. Their status as Void Lords had been revoked, and they were almost bullied by the other lords. However, seeing that they were familiar with Azeroth, Jaden gave them a new mission. Since there was still time, Duque decided to take a vacation. I'm just a mortal. Even a demigod will get tired and die. I've only had a few days of rest since I started my career at 16. Duque made a lot of sense. Yes. From the end of World War II until Nazul's invasion, torturing us at the Wind Lake doesn't count. Torturing us for another 10 years while Karazhan was floating in the void doesn't count either. Sasha laughed evilly. Sigh. You're a human. You don't have any consciousness at all. As he spoke, Duque's claws became restless. After being together for more than 10 years, how could they not know what Duque wanted to do? But they just couldn't resist Duque. His sword shone through 19 continents. He defeated the Wind King for 300 rounds. Alright, while William was busy preparing for the expedition, and Sar was busy reorganizing the tribe's economy and people's livelihood, Duque was busy. Morning. Jaina, today I'll study the magic flow model of writing with you. The gentleman Duque warmly greeted his disciple. Jaina, who was busy with supplies, gave Duque a word. Scram. Right, I'm coming. Boo. Afternoon. Tyrant, let's discuss how to serve the gods. I only serve Alun. Tyrant slapped away Duque's claws and said seriously. I've already asked Alun to help you apply for leave. Boo-hoo. She was betrayed by her own god. Again. Tyrant covered her face and didn't want to say anything. Night. Alicia, you and Kali are here. Duque, we're very busy. The Alliance has fought so many battles, our treasury is enough to play a rat race. Here, I have a good idea to solve the financial deficit. Let's issue paper currency. Like this. Boo-hoo, Duque, we love you to death. Night. Savannah's. The best singer is always the last to appear. Hee. In summary, Duque was very busy. In the second half of 22 years after the Dark Portal, the entire Azeroth was licking its wounds. The Alliance had spent all of its savings since the third battle at the Dark Portal in one go. Money and resources. Furthermore, during Naxxramaz's rampage in the Eastern Kingdom, it destroyed many villages and killed many civilians. It could be said that apart from training a strong army, the Alliance had suffered a great loss. Chapter 1373. Compared to the Alliance, the Horde suffered even more. Manpower, material resources, and economy were on the verge of collapse. The only good thing was that not only did the Alliance not take advantage of the situation, but they also raised the purchase price of minerals and other materials. And they used the Horde's most scarce food and medicine in direct exchange. They could shamelessly ask the Alliance for supplies. Wajin now felt like a beggar, running to the Alliance every day to ask for disaster relief supplies. But manpower was not enough. Unless all the orcs were genetically modified, it would be impossible for Thrall to create a population of hundreds of thousands in a short period of time. 150,000 adult orcs, 50,000 Tauren, 20,000 trolls, 20,000 Forsaken, 20,000 goblins and 38,000 goblins. The total adult population of the Horde was less than 300,000, not even as large as a human kingdom. What's worse, this number was a lot of exaggeration. Most of the Horde were rough people and most of them were illiterate. It was good enough to count up to 3, and those with a little bit of culture ran to be shaman priests. Do you think the shaman would be the ant of the horde's population statistics? This number was calculated with the help of the unreliable goblins and Forsaken. Because the horde's territory was sparsely populated, transportation was inconvenient, and many villages did not contact the outside world for 10 days to half a month. No one knew whether or not they had been destroyed. Thrall only knew that help letters were being sent to Orgrimmar, asking for people, food and wood to build houses. Thrall felt a headache coming on. At this time the Alliance made an offer that the Horde couldn't refuse, an expedition to the Outland together. In Tan Eris, in the Horde's retreat camp, Thrall and a group of chiefs welcomed a visit from Duque. The Outland and Draenor that the Alliance calls and the Our World that you call have millions of your orc compatriots, don't they? If the Horde is willing to continue to march with the Alliance and kill the Burning Legion led by Illidan, the Alliance doesn't mind the Horde migrating the orcs to the Horde's territory on the Kalimdor continent. We can even open the portal between the Dark Portal and Theramore so that the immigrants can arrive as soon as possible. When Duque said this, he had a faint smile on his face as if he was talking about a small matter that had nothing to do with the Alliance. That kind of ease made Sal, Wajin and Orgrim's eyelids twitch. Their home was about to collapse. The orcs were forced to cross the Dark Portal and launch the first battle of the Dark Portal in an attempt to conquer the world of Azeroth. Ever since Thrall could remember, he had heard such stories. To Sal, the word, our world, was both distant and unfamiliar, yet it seemed to be close at hand. Regardless of whether this could be blamed on the conspiracy of the Burning Legion, in the past 25 years, Dan, who had grasped the power of the tribe, abused his dark powers and caused the orcs' homeland to wither. Then Nazul courted death and blew up the orcs' homeland again. Just by looking at the tragic scene of the Hellfire Peninsula that Duque had provided, Sal and the other tribal elders felt their hearts wrench. It's even more dilapidated than before. Orgrim muttered in a dreamy voice. In the past, the old tribe had gathered an army numbering in the millions and gathered in front of the Gate of Darkness. They wanted to use crude weapons and the strong bodies of the beastmen to destroy all their enemies. Unfortunately, the past became nothing in the blink of an eye, and the million-strong army was annihilated. The past was the past, and what was in front of the tribe was a choice that they had no other choice. Privately, every beastman was his brother and sister. Sal could not abandon his compatriots and leave them to die in a world that was being destroyed day by day. Publicly, the addition of millions of beastmen could definitely greatly strengthen the strength of the tribe. Any of the chiefs would be good, and there was no reason to refuse. With a few simple eye contact, the tribe had reached an internal consensus. Sal said in his deep voice, "Fight against the evil Burning Legion and save our compatriots. This is the tribe's duty and obligation. The tribe will attack." Duque nodded gently, "Very well." Then Duque's eyes were like lightning as he swept across the audience. As long as the chiefs were a little weaker, they did not dare to look at Duque's eyes that were full of elemental fluctuations and divinity. They all bowed their heads. "I know the tribe still has doubts. Is the alliance too good to the tribe?" The wise men led by Wajin were silent. Only Wajin raised his head and looked at Duque without fear. Not only him but every chief was waiting for an answer. Duque smiled coolly. "Everyone here, even the chiefs who have fought directly with the Burning Legion, may still have the impression of the Burning Legion when hundreds of thousands of demons swept through Mount Hyjal, right?" Grom and the others nodded. "With the help of the Dimensional Dragon King Nozdormu, I went back to the ancient war 10,000 years ago." Duque gently waved his hand, and a three-dimensional projection of the war suddenly appeared in front of the tribal chiefs. Hiss! Many chiefs gasped on the spot. They saw the incomparably strong boar god Agamagan, with his violent charge, easily knocking a large group of demons into the air, and tearing everything in his way to pieces with his long tusks. In the southern part of the Barren Lands, the core area of the tribe's territory, there were two places, Razor Highland and Razor Swamp. Most of the tribal chiefs had a deep understanding of the ferocity of the boars and the boars there. When they saw Agamagan, who was worshipped by the boars, the shock they felt was far greater than that of other demigods. However, under the siege of tens of thousands of demons, this seemingly invincible demigod finally exhausted his strength and life, and was finally killed by two low-tier void lords, Not only Agamagan but a large number of demigods, including Malorn the White Deer, who was known as the #1 god of the Azeroth wilderness, died in this battle. The 5-minute video ended very quickly. In the huge tent, only the howling of the Tanaris desert echoed. Duque was clearly calm, but everyone felt that his voice was full of sonorous temperament. In the ancient war, demigods were like dogs and the strong were everywhere. Do you want an answer? This was the answer. So what if the Alliance let millions of tribes enter the world of Azeroth? It was just a few million more cannon fodder. That's right. When the Burning Legion really invades, millions of tribes are cannon fodder, and so are tens of millions of Alliance members. You are cannon fodder, and even I, a demigod, am cannon fodder. In the face of absolute power of destruction, we are no different. Unknowingly, Sal and the other chiefs' breathing had become heavy. Chapter 1374. Dewey's speech continued. But we're also very lucky. Azeroth is the only planet in the vast universe that has a powerful planetary protection spell formation. As long as the spell formation is still functioning, we don't have to worry about the strongest demons of the Burning Legion breaking into Azeroth. Archerons can't kill, Jaden can't, and even Sargeras can't. Let's work hard. If we don't want our descendants to be enslaved by demons, and if we don't want our homeland to be destroyed again, we can only work together. Duque's words were like a giant hammer pounding on the hearts of every chief. It was thought-provoking. If Duque had said this during the first battle at the Dark Portal, he would probably have been laughed at. But after experiencing so much, especially after Mount Hyjal, the tribe had a deep understanding of how powerful and terrifying the enemy was. Duke's seemingly overly magnanimous action was ultimately determined by the huge difference in realm and vision between the leader of the Alliance and the leader of the Horde. In front of the Burning Legion, a super powerful enemy that would become almost impossible to resist if they were not careful, the grudges between the Alliance and the Horde were nothing more than child's play. We understand. Let the Alliance and the tribe continue to work together to resist the Burning Legion. Thrall punched himself heavily in the chest. I swear that as long as the Alliance doesn't break the Covenant, the tribe will be the Alliance's ally. Duque nodded. I also swear that as long as the tribe doesn't break the Covenant, the Alliance will not take the initiative to attack the tribe. One pair was big, one was small. 4 hands with completely different styles were tightly clasped together. Thrall, you know that I've become a demigod of the weave. I really can't leave now. As for the specific matters of the expedition to the Outer Realm, Varian Rin will come to discuss with the tribe later. Okay. When Duque and Thrall finished discussing the big issues, Grom suddenly stood up. "You old friend, what's wrong?" Duque asked with a smile. The famous Lord Howl was old. Time had left a deep mark on this legendary hero who had experienced 3 battles at the Dark Portal, Mount Hyjal, and on Karaj. Grom had lost an arm and a lot of his hair had fallen off. He tied the rest of his hair into a messy bun and tied it behind his head like a spring onion. His once resolute face was now full of wrinkles. His white beard and even his body hair made one's heart ache just by looking at him. Was this still the same Lord Howl who had sent Cenarius to the afterlife with a swing of his axe and instantly killed an abyssal lord? Duque did not speak. His heart was filled with complicated emotions. It was his intervention that prevented this legendary hero from dying before the Battle of Mount Hyjal. It was also because of his actions that he truly understood what it meant to be a hero past his prime. In the entire battle of on Karaj, Grom did not perform well at all. Perhaps letting Grom die as he did in history was the best ending for an incomparably courageous orc warrior. On the surface, Duque was expressionless, but his heart was filled with regret. Grom caught Duque's thoughts very well. Grom Hellscream was never a sensitive person. When a person got older, they would see many things that they could not see when they were young. Grom's face suddenly twitched. His shoulders trembled, but he still spoke. His voice was filled with a strange power, as if it brought everyone back to the long river of history. The first half of my life I fought for the clan and the second half for the tribe. I've made many mistakes. I was the first to drink demon blood and massacre humans. I even accidentally killed the demigod Cenarius, causing the tribe to fall into a passive position. I've been in pain, lost myself in the demon blood addiction. But I've never regretted it because I swore that for the rest of my life, I would cut down the tribe's enemies with my axe. Now it seems that I'm not far from achieving this goal." When Grom said this, all the chiefs, including Cao, fell silent. Grom's battle strength was declining, visible to the naked eye. His movements were sluggish and his strength weakened. As a result, he was no longer the spearhead of the tribe's attacks. This was the inevitable outcome for every orc warrior who did not die on the battlefield. In the past, everyone had seen too many warriors like this. Normally, they would even fight to be the vanguard in order to end themselves. Or they would challenge a publicly recognized powerful monster to prove themselves, or they would forever disappear from the sight of their own kind. Grom longed for the final glory, but he could never get it. Even the true deity Si Thun had died, but he was still living in this world. This time he had suffered some internal damage. Even the holy light and shaman's power could not heal him. Healing magic could repair the body, but it could not fight against aging. He was almost 60 years old. Orc warriors were usually bad at math. Even he did not know how old he was. But this age, even for shamans who rarely went to the front lines, was extremely old. It was foreseeable that if there was a next battle, his performance would be even worse. Cao could vaguely guess why Grom's actions were like this. Grom turned around and said to Cao, "Great Chief, I'm old. It's very likely that I can no longer serve the tribe." Cao wanted to comfort Grom, but he did not know where to start. Beside him, Orgrim's mouth twitched for a while. Perhaps he wanted to persuade him to become a Death Knight, but Orgrim remained silent. An old and frail orc hero, even if he became a forgotten warrior, would not be very strong. Orgrim himself was the best example. His current strength could not be compared to his strength 22 years ago. Thrall finally let out a long sigh. "Grom, you did a good job. The tribe thanks you for your 20 years of fighting. If there's anything else you want to do, go ahead and do it." "Thank you, Great Chief." Grom knelt on the ground and kowtowed heavily. When he stood up again, there was no longer any confusion on his face. He turned to look at Duque. "Orcs will take revenge and repay kindness. I owe you my life. It seems that I will never be able to repay it in this lifetime." "You don't actually have to." Duque stopped mid-sentence. He saw Grom's fiery eyes. "My life belongs to the tribe. Before my life ends, even the last second, it has nothing to do with you, Duke Marcus. But from the moment my life ends, I swear that my soul will belong to you. As long as it is not against the tribe, you can order me around forever. I, Grom Hellscream, will never complain." Chapter 1375. That's right. Being loyal to Duque, a demigod, could theoretically grant him many benefits such as eternal life and power. However, Duque never thought that someone as staunch as Grom would submit to him for something that mortals yearned for but could not obtain. A true hero did not care about life and death. To have such an outcome, it could only be said, "You reap what you sow." There was no Duque who saved Grom's life time and time again. There was no Duque who handled the relationship with the Horde fairly. There was no way he could gain the loyalty of a legendary hero like Grom. To this day, even if Grom died of old age in his bed, he would still be the greatest hero of the Horde, and would be remembered by countless descendants. If Grom chose to repay the debt of gratitude, it would instead cause him to have the possibility of losing his illustrious reputation. The Beastmen could not accept a hero who sold his soul after death, even if this hero had contributed greatly to the Horde. Without the interference of the Devil's blood, the Beastmen's values had returned to before they fell into madness. It was the typical way of nature, where the soul returned to the earth and longed for the blessings of their ancestors. Although they could reluctantly accept a forgotten one like Orgrim who had come back from the dead, it did not mean that they respected him from the bottom of their hearts. This natural conflict between life and death was not something that could be easily resolved. Therefore, Grom's actions were a contradiction in itself. The glory of the Horde? Or his own principles? His actions could not be said to be wrong, nor could they be said to be right. However, no one could deny that if the legendary hero Grom became a sole messenger under Duque, it would undoubtedly deepen the bond between the Horde and the Alliance. It was very likely that this would become a completely new bridge that could not be estimated. To the Horde who was on the weaker side, this might be an opportunity. At this moment, everyone looked at Duque. Duque had a faint smile on his lips, but what was more eye-catching was his open arms. I am not a hypocrite. Under my command I have a black witch who has done many evil things, a holy knight who has turned into a monster, and a frost dragon who once ravaged the continent. Why can't I have a beastman hero? As long as you have the same goal of fighting against the Burning Legion and protecting Azeroth, I welcome all powerful people to join. So welcome Grom. Duque. Unknowingly, Grom felt himself choking up. In this life he had never knelt to anyone. Even if it was 2 generations of great chieftains, he would only bow to them and hit his sturdy chest with his fist. But at this moment he had the urge to kneel down on one knee. Not because of loyalty, not because of the formal master-servant relationship, but because of Duque's magnanimity in abandoning hatred and narrow national prejudice for the sake of the world. As soon as he bent down, he found himself hugged by Duque. In terms of physique, it looked ridiculous. Although Duque was more than 1.8 meters tall, he was still like a child hugging an adult to a burly orc who was 2.4 meters tall. Grom froze for a moment, then bent down and used his remaining right arm to gently pat Duque's back. It had nothing to do with race or identity. They were comrades who shared the same goal. Pop, pop, clap, clap, clap. As the chief, Sal was the first to applaud. The deep and resounding applause woke everyone from their stupor. With Sal taking the lead, the other chiefs started to follow in this rather human way of encouragement. Palms the size of palms started to clap. Congratulations, Grom. Orgrim said from the bottom of his heart. It was a pity that Undead didn't have tears, or else he might have shed tears of excitement. Congratulations, Grom. Sal had a sincere smile on his face. He felt very conflicted. The chief he trusted the most was about to reach the end of his life, but he had chosen a path that no other orc had taken before. Perhaps this would be the start of a new glory, or perhaps an unknown tribulation and curse. Even if he didn't think that Duque would look down on Grom, what if the alliance and tribe fell out in the future? Thinking of this, Sal couldn't suppress the anxiety in his heart. However, as long as he was still the chief, the tribe would not go down the wrong path and go against the alliance, right? After the hug, Duque turned to Sal. I still have work to do. I need to focus on the expansion and stability of the magic net in the next few days. If it's about the situation with Azeroth, please look for Magni. If it's about the Outland expedition, please look for Varian. Understood. Duque left. As a new demigod, he had as many things to do as there were stars in the sky. After Duque left, Grom announced that he would openly accept disciples in Orgrimmar. He wanted to use the last moments of his life to pass on his martial arts and techniques to the next generation. When he was alive, he belonged to the tribe. After death, he served Duque. In Silithus, the evacuation was still ongoing. The insectoids swore loyalty to Duque. To many people, this wasn't absolute insurance. Duque didn't object and agreed to keep the Cenarian fortress. He also promised to strengthen the railway from Taneris to Ungoro Crater and then to Silithus. Firstly, it was to monitor them, and secondly, it would increase the Alliance's territory. Sending the insectoids of On Courage to the Door of Darkness thousands of miles away was definitely a huge project. The insectoids' stamina wasn't unlimited. They had huge bodies and powerful combat power, but the price they had to pay was an astonishing amount of food. If they really migrated with the insectoids, it would probably be no different from the Courage insectoids sweeping through the Kalimdor continent. Thinking of this, Duque felt a headache coming on. Tens of thousands of insectoids couldn't use the portal at all. Otherwise, even a demigod like Duque wouldn't be able to handle the shocking mana consumption. But there was a way. Emperor Vecnalas smiled and gave Duque an idea. Master, you only want the insectoids to be mounts and combat power in the Outland. Why don't you transport the eggs to the Door of Darkness and hatch them? Oh, there was such a thing? Duque blushed. Alright, your suggestion isn't bad. But I'm worried that the cursed land where the Door of Darkness is located will affect the will of the new Courage insectoids. Set the hatching point at the intersection of the Land of Sorrow and Upwind Path. The Land of Sorrows was the Swamp of Sorrows. In order to ensure the supply line between the Stormwind Kingdom and the Overwatch Fort, more than half of the Swamp of Sorrows had disappeared since the 3rd year of the Dark Portal. It had become a military field. Only the Temple of Hacker in the east and the Pool of Tears around the temple were left, as well as the swamp. The cursed land in the south wouldn't work, and although Hacker had died in the east, there was no guarantee that there would be any will left after his death to trick the Alliance. So, setting the hatching point next to Karazhan was also to monitor them. This was the best choice. Master is wise. Vecnalas bowed. Chapter 1376. After handing over the Alliance's affairs, Duque opened a portal to Darnassus and visited the moon goddess Elune in the moon goddess temple. Under the night sky, Duque waited for the goddess will to arrive. There was no overbearing aura, no supreme majesty. There was only a gentle aura, just like the moonlight that was as clear as water. Thank you, Duke Marcus. You've done a lot for this world. I'm glad that you've once again proven that my foresight was right. If giving Tyrant to Duque in the ancient war 10,000 years ago was a little like throwing the kin away, Elune was more gratified now. After spending more than 10,000 years together, she had long treated Tyrant as her own daughter. In fact, she had spent more time with Tyrant than she had with her own son, Cenarius. Duque raised his head and nodded. Everything is for Azeroth. The goddess gave a heartfelt compliment. Ah, that's rare. You must know that many gods of the wilderness do not have your awareness. I rose because of Azeroth, and because of it I'm extraordinary. My thoughts and will in this regard should be the same as yours, Elune. Indeed. Why did you call me here this time? Digging out the abscess of the world is a good thing in the long run. But in the short run, the damaged will of the world will sleep. As one of the few existences in this world that can influence the situation, you and I hope to protect this world during this period of healing. Naturally. I've heard of the Alliance's plan to attack Draenor. What I'm trying to say is that you can't leave Azeroth. I know that this request may be a little excessive, but I can feel evil spying on Azeroth. Not only the unknown enemy, even the Lich King Arthas in the extreme north woke up the moment we killed Thun. Hearing the goddess' words, Duque frowned. The Alliance had yet to recover and the magic net had just been built. That was why Duque had sent William to fight the front lines. In Duque's mind, it wouldn't be a problem for William to fight against people like Vashj. It would be irresponsible of him to deal with Illidan, who had just absorbed a large amount of evil and was at his peak. Duque wasn't sure if there was such a thing as a protagonist halo in this world. In any case, the original world-destroying third cultivator of true virtue, Pharaoh Khadgar, had long since died. This was an indisputable fact. If William, who was supposed to become the leader of the Alliance, died prematurely in the Outland, Duque would be at fault. On the other hand, since Elune had mentioned Arthas, Duque had to be on his guard. No one could guarantee that Earthies would wait until both Illidan and Kil'jaeden were kneeling before her. What was an ambitious and ruthless person? An ambitious and ruthless person could do what others couldn't. Ambitious people could endure and wait, but they would never sit and wait for death. If he discovered that Duque was preparing to launch a blitzkrieg attack on Delano's Ice Crown Fortress, Arthas would immediately jump out to fight with Duque even if he was not in his complete form. Phew. Duque let out a long sigh and thought about it again. He looked at Tyrande, who was beside him, and met her expectant eyes. All right. I promise you. Elune heaved a sigh of relief. A wise and reasonable decision. Delano's star soul has already been annihilated. Even if you use your main body to descend there, you will only be a slightly stronger mortal. If you encounter any misfortune, the divinity of Azeroth that you possess will instead become the key for the Burning Legion to open the protective array of planet Azeroth. Duque understood what Elune meant. If he used his main body, he wouldn't gain much even if he won, and if he lost, he would even lose his pants. If it was in the past, he would naturally not be afraid of those who wore shoes. With nothing, it was easy to be fearless. Now that Duque had a large family business, he had started a harem of the highest quality in all of Azeroth. It was precisely because he had something to protect that he had the motivation to be the world's guardian. He knew that it was likely to be a trap, but he still foolishly jumped into it. He obviously couldn't win this kind of deal. Illidan's storm rage is very strong now. He isn't someone that other mortals can easily deal with. Is there any way? The moonlight in the sky flickered for a moment. It was clearly just an illusory female projection. Elun seemed to smile slyly. If you promise not to kidnap my high priest before you become a true god, I will teach you a little magic. Duque was speechless. Sure enough, she saw through me? Duque came this time to listen to Elun's thoughts, and also to officially take Tyrant away. The leader of the night elves was his lover, which was fine. But his lover was the high priest of another god, which was a little troublesome. Duque and Elun both knew that there was no conflict of interest between them, and it should be fine to be long-term allies. But Tyrant's existence obviously involved a conflict of doctrine. The high priest was the highest representative of a god in the mortal world, and his faith and ability were absolutely impeccable. On the other hand, because of absolute faith, a god only needed a thought to destroy his high priest. Duque didn't want the sword of Damocles to hang around Tyrant's neck all day, so it was necessary for Tyrant to change her faith. Even if she didn't believe in him, becoming a non-believer or something else would be better than now. This was a matter of principle. Duque didn't even mention this to Tyrant. Instead, Elun revealed it after thinking about it. Goddess, I have never thought of abandoning my faith in you. Tyrant was at a loss. Child, this has nothing to do with loyalty. It's rare for a powerful demigod to appear in Azeroth, and she has a strong will to fight against evil. As long as you don't object, I am willing to see you become our bond. The moonlight shone down gently like a mother's hand, gently stroking Tyrant's green hair. This. Elun looked at Duque again. But Tyrant has served me for more than 10,000 years. Everyone in the Night Elves and Cenarian Circle has accepted this fact. It won't be easy to change. Tyrant has to at least cultivate an outstanding successor. At least you have to become a true god. Only then will it be easier for Tyrant to take that step. Duque bowed slightly. Your wisdom is unparalleled. I agree. Thank you for your understanding. Elun sent a strand of her will into Duque's sea of consciousness. After discussing the situation in Azeroth a little more, the will of the goddess disappeared. The Tyrant's expression was extremely complicated. Elun is a kind goddess. Can't you see that she is also blessing us? Duque gently pulled Tyrant into his arms. Unknowingly, their fingers were intertwined. After a long time. You should go back first. My mind is in a mess. Okay. That night, Duque did not stay overnight and returned to Karazhan. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.